I still remember the exact moment my life shattered. It's funny how certain memories burn themselves into your mind. Every detail crystallized like some sick souvenir you never asked for. The slight breeze through her half-open apartment window. The faint smell of the perfume I'd given her for our anniversary. The way the evening light cast long shadows across her face as she delivered the words that would echo in my head for years to come. You'll always be a loser, Mark. I can't keep pretending otherwise. Allison stood there, arms crossed, her expression a mixture of pity and disgust that made my stomach turn. 6 years together, and this was how it ended. Not with the tearful, mutual parting I might have expected, but with a character assassination that left me hollow. What? I managed, the word feeling foreign in my mouth. My brain scrambled to make sense of what was happening. Just that morning, we'd been planning a weekend trip to her parents' lake house. Where is this coming from? She sighed, that performative exhalation people do when they're tired of explaining something simple to someone they think is beneath them. It's coming from 3 years of waiting for you to get your act together. From watching all my friends move forward while I'm stuck with someone who can't even get promoted beyond assistant manager at a dying electronics store. Each word hit like a physical blow. Yes, I was still assistant manager at Electromart. Yes, I'd been talking about going back to school to finish my computer science degree for years without actually doing it. But I'd been saving for our future, for a ring, for a house down payment, for the life I thought we both wanted. I've been trying, I said, hating how pathetic it sounded. The promotion is coming. Doug said, Doug's been saying that for 2 years. She cut me off. And you keep believing him because it's easier than actually making a change. Do you know how embarrassing it is when people ask what my boyfriend does? I stood there, a strange numbness spreading through my chest. This wasn't just about a breakup. This was about my entire identity being deemed worthless. I thought we were happy, I said quietly. Memories flashing through my mind. Vacations together, lazy Sunday mornings, the way she used to look at me like I was her world. I thought we were building something. Allison's laugh was sharp enough to draw blood. Building what, Mark? A life of mediocrity? Jessica's husband just made partner at his law firm. Megan's boyfriend started his own tech company. Even Rachel's new guy has actual ambitions. And what do you have? A collection of vintage video games and the same dead-end job you had when we met in college. The mention of Rachel, her best friend since high school, caught my attention. Rachel had always been kind to me, almost protective in a way I never quite understood. There had been moments when I caught her looking at me with an expression I couldn't decipher, but I'd never dwelled on it. Rachel was beautiful, smart, and successful in her own right as a physical therapist, but she was Allison's friend, which put her firmly off limits in my mind. I've been putting money aside, I said, knowing even as the words left my mouth that they wouldn't matter. I've been planning for us. Planning? She rolled her eyes. Dreaming, you mean? That's all you do. Dream about what could be instead of making anything happen. She walked to her dresser, pulling open the top drawer. I'm with someone else now. Someone with an actual future. The room tilted beneath my feet. You're what? Don't act surprised. She wouldn't meet my eyes now, suddenly busy organizing things that didn't need organizing. We've barely connected in months. When was the last time we even had sex? 3 weeks ago, after her company party. I remembered because she'd been especially affectionate that night, and I'd thought maybe we were turning a corner after a rough patch. Now I wondered if guilt had driven that sudden passion. How long? I asked, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. Does it matter? It matters to me. She sighed again. 2 months. It's Brandon. From marketing. Brandon, the guy she'd mentioned a few times in passing. The rising star at her advertising firm who drove a Tesla and had an MBA from Northwestern. The guy she'd assured me was just a colleague. When I'd noticed his name appearing in her stories more frequently. 2 months, I repeated, trying to process the information. So all those late nights at work were mostly with him, yes. She finally looked at me, her expression hardening. He sees my potential, Mark. He pushes me to be better instead of dragging me down into his complacency. I stood there, absorbing blow after blow, wondering why I wasn't fighting back, why I wasn't angry. But all I felt was a profound emptiness, as if someone had scooped out everything inside me and left only an echo chamber for her cruel words. I need you to get your things, she continued, opening another drawer and pulling out a small pile of my clothes. T-shirts I'd left over the months, a sweatshirt she used to sleep in. Brandon's coming over later, and I'd rather not have to explain this. That was when the first spark of anger flickered to life. Not at the betrayal, not even at the cheating, but at the casual cruelty of it all. The dismissal of 6 years like they were nothing more than a regrettable detour in her life's journey. "You couldn't have told me this before I drove all the way over here," I asked, my voice finally finding some strength. "I tried to do this over the phone," she countered. "You insisted on coming over to talk about our future. I figured I might as well rip the Band-Aid off." She thrust the small pile of my belongings at me. It was pathetic, really. How little of myself I'd managed to integrate into her life despite all our years together. A few articles of clothing, a toothbrush, a phone charger, the physical manifestation of how easily erasable I was. "There's a box by the door with the rest of your stuff," she said, already turning away. "Don't forget the Xbox games. Brandon doesn't play." Of course he doesn't, I thought bitterly. Brandon probably spent his free time reading the Wall Street Journal and training for triathlons. I took the clothes numbly and walked to the door, where, as promised, a cardboard box sat waiting, my existence with Allison neatly packaged for removal. On top lay the framed photo from our trip to Seattle 2 years ago. Both of us smiling on the ferry, Mount Rainier in the background. I remembered how happy we'd been that day, or how happy I thought we'd been. Had she been pretending even then? "Is there anything else you need to say?" I asked, turning back to her, some irrational part of me still hoping this was all an elaborate, cruel joke. Allison looked at me, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw a flicker of regret in her eyes. But it vanished so quickly I must have imagined it. "Just that I hope you figure things out, Mark. I really do. But I couldn't keep waiting for you to become the person you keep promising to be." She hesitated, then added the final twist of the knife. "Some people are just meant to be followers, not leaders. There's no shame in accepting who you are." I stared at her, this stranger wearing the face of the woman I'd loved for 6 years, and finally felt something break loose inside me. "You know what, Allison? You've always been good at packaging things, making them look pretty on the outside." I picked up the box. Guess that advertising career was a perfect fit after all. Her eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you've been selling me a relationship that didn't exist. And I've been buying it for way too long." I stepped into the hallway. "Enjoy your upgrade. I hope he's worth it." I didn't wait for her response. I walked down the 3 flights of stairs to the building's exit, the box awkward in my arms, my mind a jumble of disconnected thoughts. It wasn't until I reached my car, a 10-year-old Honda Civic that Allison had always gently suggested I replace, that the full weight of what had happened began to sink in. 6 years, gone. My future, the one I'd been planning and saving for, erased in a 20-minute conversation. I set the box on the passenger seat and sat behind the wheel, staring blankly at Allison's apartment building. I should start the car. I should drive away. I should do something other than sit here like the loser she accused me of being. But I couldn't move, because the truth that kept echoing in my head was the worst part of all. What if she was right? What if I was exactly what she said? A perpetual underachiever, a dreamer without the courage to make those dreams reality, a follower pretending he could be more. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, half expecting, hoping, it was Allison telling me she'd made a terrible mistake. Instead, I saw Rachel's name on the screen. A text message that read, "Hey, just checking in. Are you okay? Call me if you need to talk." Rachel. How did she know? Had Allison already told her friends about the breakup? About replacing me with Brandon from marketing with his Tesla and his MBA? The thought of being discussed, dissected, and dismissed by Allison's social circle sent a fresh wave of humiliation through me. I didn't respond to Rachel's text. Instead, I finally started the car and pulled away from the curb, away from the apartment where I'd spent countless nights, away from the woman who just redefined me as nothing more than a stepping stone on her path to something better. I drove aimlessly, the city lights blurring as unexpected tears filled my eyes. Not for Allison, though the pain of her betrayal was acute, but for myself. For the years I'd spent in a comfortable holding pattern, mistaking stability for progress. For the man I'd failed to become. "You'll always be a loser, Mark." The words played on repeat in my head, a mantra of failure I couldn't escape. The worst part was, in that moment, I believed her. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't face my empty apartment with its secondhand furniture and walls that had needed painting for the last 3 years. Instead, I found myself parked outside Jim's bar, a dive I hadn't visited since my early 20s. The kind of place where the lighting was dim enough to hide a man falling apart. The interior was exactly as I remembered. Dark wood, the faint smell of decades of spilled beer, and a quietness that invited introspection rather than conversation. A few solitary patrons sat nursing drinks, each in their own bubble of isolation. Perfect. I claimed a corner booth and ordered a whiskey neat, something I rarely drank but seemed appropriate for the occasion. The bartender, an older man with knowing eyes, set the glass in front of me without comment and retreated, sensing my need for space. 3 drinks later, my phone had accumulated 7 missed calls and a dozen text messages. 2 from my mother, wondering why I'd missed our weekly Sunday call. 1 from my co-worker Doug about a scheduling issue at the store. The rest from Rachel, each growing increasingly concerned. Mark, please let me know you're okay. I just talked to Allison. Please call me. I'm worried about you. Just send me a text so I know you're all right. This isn't like you. I'm going to start calling hospitals if I don't hear from you soon. The last one made me laugh bitterly. Not like me? Which me was that? The reliable, predictable Mark who never caused trouble? The Mark who was so forgettable that his girlfriend of 6 years could replace him without missing a beat? I tossed the phone back onto the table and signaled for another drink. Rough night? The voice came from my left, where a man about my age had taken a seat at the next booth. He had the solid build of someone who spent serious time at the gym, with close-cropped hair and the confident posture of a person comfortable in his own skin. You could say that. I replied, not particularly interested in conversation, but too Midwestern polite to shut him down completely. Let me guess, he said, taking a sip of what looked like club soda. Women troubles? I snorted. That obvious? There's only 3 reasons a man drinks alone on a Sunday night, he said matter-of-factly. Job loss, death, or a woman. You don't have the shell-shocked look of unemployment, and you're not crying hard enough for a death, so he shrugged. Expert analysis, I muttered, taking another sip of my whiskey, feeling the burn travel down my throat. Gold star for you. Instead of being put off by my rudeness, he laughed. I'm Ethan, by the way. Mark. So what happened, Mark? She cheat? Leave you for another guy? Or just the classic, it's not you, it's me routine? I stared at my glass, wondering why I was even considering sharing my humiliation with a stranger. But maybe that was exactly why it felt possible. He was a stranger. He didn't know me as reliable, predictable Mark. He had no expectations. She traded up, I said finally. Found herself a guy with better prospects. Told me I'd always be a loser on her way out the door. Ethan let out a low whistle. Damn, that's cold. 6 years together. Apparently she's been seeing this guy for 2 months. Some hotshot at her company. 6 years? Ethan shook his head. That's rough, man. I'm sorry. I shrugged, trying to appear more nonchalant than I felt. The worst part is, I'm not even sure she's wrong. About what? About me being a loser. The alcohol had loosened my tongue. I'm 32 years old, assistant manager at an electronics store that's probably going to close within a year. Living in the same apartment I've had since college. Driving a car that's held together with hope and duct tape. I took another drink. Meanwhile, she's climbing the corporate ladder at an advertising agency, hanging out with people who have beach houses and investment portfolios. Ethan studied me for a moment. So what are you going to do about it? The question caught me off guard. Do about it? Yeah. Are you going to prove her right or prove her wrong? I laughed humorlessly. What is this, a motivational seminar? I didn't realize Jim's bar had life coaches on staff now. I'm not a life coach, Ethan said, unfazed by my sarcasm. I'm a personal trainer who happened to go through something similar 3 years ago. My fiancée left me for her chiropractor 6 months before our wedding. Told me I was too focused on gym life and not enough on real success. I looked at him with new interest. Chomum, what happened? I could have crawled into a bottle like you're doing, he said bluntly. Instead, I doubled down on what I was good at. Got certified as a trainer, started my own business, and now I make more in a month than she does in 3. Last I heard, the chiropractor was cheating on her with a yoga instructor. Poetic justice, I murmured. The best revenge isn't getting even, Ethan said, leaning forward. It's getting better. Becoming so successful that running into your ex becomes her problem, not yours. Something about his words resonated with a part of me that wasn't completely submerged in self-pity. A part that was tired of being predictable, reliable Mark who never caused trouble and never achieved anything remarkable either. I wouldn't even know where to start, I admitted. Ethan pulled out his phone. Give me your number. First session's free. Session? Training session? He clarified. You look like you've got a decent frame under that self-pity. We can work with that. I blinked at him. I didn't say I wanted to become a gym rat. No, but you said you wanted to stop being a loser. Physical transformation is the fastest way to change how you see yourself and how others see you. It's not just about muscles. It's about proving to yourself that you can commit to something difficult and see it through. He placed his phone on the table between us. But hey, if you'd rather keep drinking and feeling sorry for yourself, that's a valid choice too. I stared at the phone, my mind racing despite the alcohol fog. Was this what rock bottom felt like? Sitting in a dive bar on a Sunday night, being offered a lifeline by a stranger while my ex moved on without a backward glance? Or was it an opportunity? What the hell? I muttered, picking up his phone and entering my number. It's not like I have anything to lose. Ethan grinned as he took his phone back. That's the spirit. I'll text you tomorrow with details. Try not to be too hungover. He stood up, leaving cash on the table for his drink. And Mark? For what it's worth, people who are actual losers don't usually spend time worrying about whether they're losers. They just blame everyone else for their problems. The fact that you're reflecting at all puts you ahead of most. With that, he was gone, leaving me alone with my whiskey and thoughts that were slightly less bleak than they had been an hour earlier. I looked at my phone, at the string of worried texts from Rachel, and felt a twinge of guilt for leaving her concern. I'm okay, I texted back. Just needed some time alone. Talk tomorrow. Her response was immediate. Thank God. I was about to call the police. Are you home safe? Heading there now, I replied, deciding in that moment that it was true. I paid my tab, left a generous tip for the bartender who had supplied alcohol and space without judgment, and walked out into the cool night air. As I drove home, more carefully than I would have an hour ago, Allison's words still echoed in my head. You'll always be a loser, Mark. But now they were accompanied by Ethan's. The best revenge isn't getting even. It's getting better. I wasn't sure yet which voice would ultimately define me. But for the first time since walking out of Allison's apartment, I felt something other than despair. A tiny spark of something that felt dangerously like determination. Morning came with the expected hangover and the unexpected ping of a text message from Ethan. Gold's Gym on 7th Street, 6 p.m. tonight. Wear something you can sweat in. No excuses. I groaned, my head pounding as memories of the previous night came flooding back. Had I really agreed to meet a stranger from a bar for a workout session? The message suggested I had. I set the phone down and buried my face in my pillow, tempted to ignore it, to call in sick to work, to pull the covers over my head and hide from the world for a day or a week or forever. You'll always be a loser, Mark. The words pushed me out of bed and into the shower, where I stood under water that was too hot, trying to wash away both the hangover and the humiliation. I had to go to work. I had to face people who might already know about my breakup. I had to pretend I wasn't falling apart inside. Electromart was quiet when I arrived, just a few customers browsing the increasingly sparse shelves. Our location had been struggling for years, unable to compete with online retailers and bigger box stores. Most of our business now came from repairs and older customers who preferred face-to-face service. You look like hell, Doug commented as I clocked in. Doug was the store manager, 15 years my senior and perpetually unbothered by our store's declining fortunes. Rough weekend? You could say that, I muttered, not wanting to get into it. Well, shake it off. Corporate visit tomorrow. Need you sharp. Great. Another corporate visit meant another round of passive-aggressive comments about our sales numbers, followed by empty promises about revitalization plans, followed by nothing actually changing. Just like every other aspect of my life, the day crawled by. I helped an elderly woman choose a new flip phone. I processed a return for a defective Bluetooth speaker. I avoided checking my phone for messages from Allison that wouldn't come, or messages from Rachel that would require emotional energy I didn't have. At lunch, I sat alone in the break room, picking at a sandwich I'd hastily made that morning. My coworker Jen came in, glancing at me with what looked like pity. I heard about you and Allison, she said, opening the refrigerator. That's rough. I froze mid-bite. Hey, you. How did you hear about that? Oh, she looked uncomfortable. I follow her on Instagram. She, posted something last night with some guy. I just assumed. I set my sandwich down, my appetite gone. Right. Of course she did. I'm sorry, Mark. That was insensitive of me. It's fine, I said automatically, the same response I always gave when things were very much not fine. We'd been growing apart for a while. Jen nodded, clearly relieved not to have to navigate an emotional conversation with her coworker. Well, plenty of fish in the sea and all that, right? Right. I agreed, gathering my lunch things. I should get back to the floor. I spent the rest of my shift in a fog, mechanically going through the motions while my mind churned. Allison had already made their relationship Instagram official, less than 24 hours after ending things with me. A relationship that had apparently been going on for 2 months while I remained oblivious. Planning weekend trips and saving for an engagement ring she would have laughed at. By closing time, I'd almost talked myself out of meeting Ethan. What was the point? Getting in shape wouldn't change who I fundamentally was. It wouldn't erase the years of complacency or suddenly transform me into the kind of man who drove a Tesla and had an MBA. Physical changes couldn't fix what was broken inside me. As I walked to my car, I pulled out my phone to text Ethan that I wouldn't be coming. But before I could, I saw a notification from Instagram. Despite my better judgment, I opened the app and searched for Allison's profile, and there it was. A photo posted 14 hours ago, Allison and Brandon at some rooftop bar, cocktails in hand, his arm around her waist, her smile radiant in a way it hadn't been with me for months. The caption read, "Finally not hiding the best thing in my life. Rushed upgrade, Mosher worth the while." The comments were worse. Friends congratulating her, someone named Melissa writing, "So much better than the last model," with a laughing emoji, and Allison's response, "Quality over quantity. 6 years taught me what I don't want." My hand tightened around the phone. 6 years reduced to a punchline. 6 years of memories of building a life together, of planning and dreaming, dismissed as a learning experience, a cautionary tale to laugh about over expensive cocktails. I found myself driving to Gold's Gym on 7th Street without consciously making the decision. Parking in the lot, I stared at the entrance, watching fit people coming and going, feeling like an imposter, even considering stepping inside. I was about to start the car again when I saw Ethan walking toward me, recognition on his face. "You came," he said as I reluctantly rolled down my window. "But you're not dressed to work out." "I'm not sure about this," I admitted. "It seems, I don't know, like a Band-Aid on a bullet wound." Ethan leaned against my car. "Let me guess. You saw something on social media today. X already moved on publicly?" I winced. "How did you know?" "Because that's what they do," he said matter-of-factly. "They need to control the narrative. Make it look like they're winning the breakup." He studied me for a moment. "You've got 2 choices right now, Mark. You can go home, order a pizza, stalk her social media, and feel progressively worse about yourself. Or you can come inside with me, borrow some gym clothes, and start changing your life today." Not for her. For you. Put that way, the choice seemed obvious. Yet I hesitated. I've never been much of a gym person. Nobody is until they are. Ethan replied with a shrug. "Look, I'm not promising this fixes everything, but it'll give you something to focus on besides her. A goal, a purpose. And trust me, the physical transformation is just the beginning. It changes how you carry yourself, how you approach problems, how you see your own potential." I took a deep breath, then turned off the car. "I don't have gym clothes with me." Ethan grinned. "I've got extra. Come on." Inside, the gym was intimidating. Mirrors everywhere. The clang of weights, fit bodies making the whole place seem like a different world from the one I usually inhabited. Ethan led me to the locker room, handed me a t-shirt and shorts, and gave me a moment to change. Looking at myself in the mirror, I really saw myself for the first time in years. Not overweight, but soft. Undefined. The body of a man who occasionally played recreational basketball, but mostly sat at a customer service desk or on a couch. The body of a man who had gotten comfortable, too comfortable. "Ready?" Ethan asked when I emerged. "As I'll ever be," I replied, still not convinced this wasn't a huge mistake. What followed was the most physically demanding hour of my adult life. Ethan didn't ease me in. He started with an assessment. How many push-ups I could do? Embarrassingly few. How many pull-ups? Exactly 0. My flexibility? Non-existent. My endurance on the treadmill? I lasted 8 minutes before feeling like death. "Well," he said when we finished, "we've got our work cut out for us, but I've seen worse starting points." I wiped sweat from my face with a towel. "Is that supposed to be encouraging?" "It's supposed to be honest," he replied. "You want someone to coddle you? Hire a therapist. You want someone to transform you? You've got me." He tossed me a water bottle. 3 days a week to start. Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Plus cardio on your own time at least twice a week. "And we're going to talk about your diet." I didn't agree to all that. I protested, though weakly. "You agreed to change your life," Ethan countered. Half measures won't cut it. So are you in or out? I thought about Allison's Instagram post, about 6 years being reduced to a cautionary tale, about being the punchline in her new upgraded life. I'm in, I said firmly, but I can't afford a personal trainer 3 times a week. Ethan waved this away. First month's on me. Consider it an investment. After that, we'll work something out. He handed me a card. My number's on there. Text me if you're sore tomorrow, which you will be. Why are you doing this? I asked, genuinely puzzled by his generosity. You don't even know me. He was quiet for a moment, his expression turning serious. When my ex left me, I was in a dark place. Like standing on a bridge at midnight dark, a stranger pulled over and talked to me for 2 hours. Never knew his name, never saw him again, but he saved my life that night. He shrugged. Sometimes the universe puts you where you need to be to help someone else. Last night, that was me at Jim's bar when you needed someone to call you on your bullshit instead of letting you wallow. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. Get some rest, Ethan said back to his brisk trainer voice. Drink protein. Take ibuprofen before bed. I'll see you Wednesday at the same time. As I drove home, my muscles already protesting the unfamiliar exertion, I realized I hadn't thought about Allison for the entire hour I'd been working out. The physical demands had forced my mind to focus only on the present, on surviving the next set, the next exercise. It was the first peace I'd had since she'd uttered those devastating words. Maybe Ethan was right. Maybe this could be a beginning rather than just an ending. My phone buzzed with a text as I pulled into my apartment complex. Rachel again. Checked in with Jen at your work. She said you seemed really down today. I'm worried about you. Can we please talk? I stared at the message, unsure how to respond. Rachel had been Allison's friend first. They'd known each other since high school, been roommates in college. It was Rachel who had introduced us at a party freshman year. Why was she so concerned about me now? Was it pity, guilt by association, or genuine friendship that extended beyond my relationship with Allison? Had a rough day, I texted back, but I'm doing better now. Thanks for checking in. Her response came quickly. Can I bring you dinner tomorrow? Just as friends. I know you probably don't feel like cooking. The offer was tempting. Rachel was good company, and the thought of not eating alone in my depressing apartment had its appeal. But it also felt complicated. She was Allison's best friend. Surely her loyalty lay there. That's really nice, but I'm starting a new workout routine. Not sure what time I'll be home, I replied, the excuse sounding weak even to me. A workout routine. That's great. I could bring something healthy. Or we could grab a smoothie after your workout. I'm a physical therapist, remember? I can give you tips on recovery. Her persistence was puzzling. And yet the thought of facing another evening alone with my thoughts was worse than whatever awkwardness might arise from spending time with my ex's best friend. Smoothie sounds good, I conceded. I'll be at Gold's Gym on 7th around 7 p.m. Perfect. I'll meet you there. And Mark, I'm really proud of you for doing something positive for yourself right now. Her words sent an unexpected warmth through me. When was the last time someone had expressed pride in me? I couldn't remember. Certainly not Allison, who had grown increasingly critical over our final year together, highlighting my shortcomings rather than my efforts. As I climbed the stairs to my second-floor apartment, the elevator had been temporarily out of order. For 8 months, I felt the satisfying ache of muscles that had been pushed to their limits. There was something honest about physical pain, something straightforward about the cause and effect of exertion and soreness. Inside my apartment, everything looked different somehow. The secondhand furniture, the bare walls, the general sense of impermanence, it all seemed like evidence of a life on pause. I'd been waiting to finish school, waiting to get promoted, waiting to be worthy of proposing to Allison. And in all that waiting, I'd forgotten to actually live. I opened my refrigerator, surveying its meager contents with new eyes. Beer, leftover pizza, sandwich fixings, condiments. The diet of a college student, not a man in his 30s. If I was going to commit to this transformation, it had to be complete. Physical, yes, but also mental, environmental, financial. Without overthinking it, I grabbed a trash bag and began clearing out the junk food, the beer, anything that didn't align with the person I suddenly wanted to become. Then I opened my laptop and began researching meal prep, protein requirements, supplementation. By the time I crawled into bed, muscles screaming from the workout, I had a grocery list prepared, a rough meal plan sketched out, and something I hadn't felt in years, a sense of purpose. As I drifted off to sleep, Allison's words still echoed. You'll always be a loser, Mark. But they were fainter now, competing with new voices. Ethan's pragmatic coaching, Rachel's unexpected support, and most surprisingly, my own voice. Quiet but growing stronger. We'll see about that. The next morning, I could barely move. Every muscle screamed in protest as I dragged myself out of bed and into the shower, where hot water provided minimal relief. Ethan had texted, "Embrace the soreness." It means change is happening. Easy for him to say. Work was a special kind of torture. Standing at the customer service desk, trying not to wince every time I had to reach for something or bend down. Doug noticed, raising an eyebrow as I struggled to stock a lower shelf. "You look like you got hit by a truck," he observed. "Started a new workout program," I admitted. Interest flickered across his face. "No kidding? Good for you, Mark. Always thought you had potential to be more than..." He gestured vaguely at the store around us, then seemed to realize what he was saying. "I mean, not that there's anything wrong with..." "It's fine," I cut him off. "I know what you mean." The corporate visit went as expected. A man and woman in expensive suits toured our struggling store, made notes on tablets, asked pointed questions about our sales strategies, and left with non-committal smiles and vague assurances about the company's commitment to brick-and-mortar locations. Same song, different verse. Doug sighed after they left. "They'll close us within a year. You should start looking elsewhere, Mark. You're young enough to start fresh." The comment might have depressed me a day ago. Today it felt like confirmation of what I already knew. It was time for change. All of it. Not just my body, but my career, my living situation, my entire approach to life. "I've been thinking about going back to school," I said, the word surprising me as much as Doug. "Finishing my computer science degree." Doug looked genuinely pleased. "You should. You've got a good head for systems. Remember how you redesigned our inventory tracking last year? Corporate actually implemented that company-wide. I'd almost forgotten about that. I'd created a more efficient system for tracking and ordering inventory, and our district manager had been impressed enough to share it with headquarters. Nothing had really come of it for me, just a gift card and a mention in the company newsletter, but it had been satisfying work. "Thanks," I said, feeling strangely emotional at this small validation. "I appreciate that." By the time my shift ended, I was determined to follow through on the plan I'd formulated the night before. I drove to the grocery store, where I filled my cart with lean proteins, vegetables, complex carbohydrates, and other items from the research I'd done. The total at checkout was more than I typically spent on groceries, but I reminded myself this was an investment, not an expense. At home, I spent 2 hours meal prepping, cooking chicken breasts, roasting vegetables, preparing portions of brown rice, and organizing it all into containers for easy grabbing throughout the week. The activity was soothing, giving my hands something to do while my mind processed the seismic shifts of the past 48 hours. At 6:30, I headed back to Gold's Gym, earlier than necessary for my meeting with Rachel, but determined to at least do some light cardio, despite my protesting muscles. The gym was busier than the previous evening, intimidatingly so, but I forced myself onto a treadmill in the corner, setting it to a moderate walking pace to avoid further injury. I was 10 minutes in when I spotted Rachel entering the gym, her eyes scanning the space until they found me. She waved, her smile genuine, and headed in my direction. Rachel had always been beautiful in a natural, unassuming way. While Allison was all sleek blonde perfection, Rachel was softer, warmer, with auburn hair usually pulled back in a practical ponytail and freckles she never bothered to conceal. As a physical therapist, she dressed for comfort and movement, but even in simple workout clothes, she had a presence that turned heads. "Look at you, getting a head start," she said as she approached, carrying a gym bag over her shoulder. Mom. "How are you feeling?" "Like I was run over by a semi," I admitted, slowing the treadmill. "Twice?" She laughed, the sound warming something in my chest. "First workout is always the worst. Mind if I join you for a bit before smoothies? I missed my morning workout." "Sure," I said, surprised but pleased. "Though fair warning, I'm going embarrassingly slow." "Perfect pace for conversation," she replied, hopping onto the treadmill next to mine. "So, want to talk about it?" I glanced at her, suddenly wary. "Did Allison send you to check on me?" Rachel's expression hardened slightly. "Allison doesn't know I'm here, and if she did, she wouldn't approve." "What do you mean?" She was quiet for a moment, focusing on adjusting her treadmill settings. "Allison and I aren't exactly on speaking terms right now." This was news to me. "Since when?" "Since I told her she was making a massive mistake and being incredibly cruel in how she ended things with you." Rachel's pace increased with her apparent agitation. And that's the sanitized version. I nearly stumbled on my treadmill. You ... Defended me? To Allison? Rachel shot me a look. Of course I did. What she did was wrong, Mark. Not just the cheating, which was bad enough, but the way she talked to you. The things she said. She shook her head. That's not how you treat someone you've been with for 6 years. That's not how you treat anyone. How do you know what she said to me? I asked, confused. Rachel's cheeks flushed slightly. She told me her plan. Before she did it, she wanted my approval, I guess. She seemed to think I'd be happy she was finally upgrading. Her fingers made air quotes around the word. As if you were a cell phone plan and not a person. I absorbed this information, unsure how to feel. And you weren't happy. I was furious, Rachel said firmly. I've watched you bend over backwards for her for years, Mark. Working that job you hate because the schedule was flexible enough for her needs. Saving for a future, she kept changing the parameters of putting her career ahead of your own ambitions. She was breathing harder now, and not just from the exercise. And for her to throw that back in your face like you were some kind of failure, when you're one of the kindest, most loyal people I know? No, that's not okay. Her passionate defense left me speechless. I'd never seen this side of Rachel before. Fiery, protective, and apparently harboring a very different view of my relationship with Allison than I'd realized. I didn't know you saw it that way, I said finally. Rachel slowed her pace, glancing at me. I've always seen you, Mark, even when you didn't see yourself. There was something in her tone, something in her eyes that made me wonder if there was more she wasn't saying. But before I could pursue it, a familiar voice called my name. Mark, you showed up. Ethan approached, looking surprised to see me before our scheduled session the following day. And you brought a friend. Ethan, this is Rachel, I said, making the introduction. Rachel, this is Ethan, the trainer who's determined to kill me through exercise. It's only murder if you die, Ethan replied cheerfully. Otherwise, it's just motivational suffering. He extended a hand to Rachel. Nice to meet you. You a friend of Mark's? Yes, Rachel said definitively, shaking his hand. An old friend. Rachel's a physical therapist, I added. She was just giving me some tips on recovery. Perfect, Ethan said. Maybe you can talk some sense into him about proper stretching. I can tell he skipped the cool-down routine I showed him yesterday. Rachel turned to me with mock severity. Is that true? You know better than to skip stretching after your first intensive workout in years. I held up my hands in surrender. Guilty. I was too focused on being able to breathe again. That settles it, Rachel declared. Smoothies can wait. First, I'm going to show you a proper recovery stretch routine. She stepped off her treadmill. Ethan, want to join us? I'm sure you have some good insights too. What followed was a 30-minute session in which Rachel and Ethan tag-teamed my fitness education, showing me stretches, discussing recovery nutrition, and generally treating me like an athlete in training rather than the out-of-shape electronics store assistant manager I actually was. Their enthusiasm was contagious, and despite the soreness, I found myself engaging fully, asking questions, taking mental notes. You've got a good foundation to work with, Rachel observed as she guided me through a hamstring stretch. Your body awareness is better than most beginners. High school basketball, I explained, and I still play pickup games sometimes. See? Ethan jumped in. You're not starting from zero. You're reawakening what's already there. By the time we finished, my muscles felt looser, the soreness more manageable, and a new feeling was taking root. A cautious optimism that maybe, just maybe, this transformation wasn't as impossible as it had seemed 48 hours ago. I need to head out for another client, Ethan said, checking his watch. But this was great. Rachel, you should join us sometime. Always good to have another expert perspective. He clapped me on the shoulder. See you tomorrow, Mark. 6 p.m. sharp. After he left, Rachel and I gathered our things and headed to the smoothie bar adjacent to the gym. She ordered something green and healthy looking. I followed her lead, trying not to wince at the kale listed among the ingredients. I like him, Rachel said as we found a table. He seems to genuinely care about helping you, not just collecting a paycheck. He's intense, I admitted. But maybe that's what I need right now. Definitely. She took a sip of her smoothie. So, speaking of what you need, tell me what happened. The real version, not the Allison spin. I hesitated, uncertain about discussing this with her. Isn't this a little weird? Talking about Allison with you? You're her best friend. Was? Rachel corrected firmly. And even when I was, that didn't mean I approved of everything she did. especially not how she treated you toward the end. There was that hint again, that suggestion that Rachel had seen problems in my relationship long before I had. It made me wonder what else I'd been blind to. So I told her everything. The sudden breakup, Allison's cruel words, the revelation of her affair with Brandon, the Instagram post. Rachel listened without interrupting, her expression shifting between sympathy, anger, and something else I couldn't quite identify. I just keep wondering if she was right, I concluded, staring into my half-finished smoothie. If I really am just a loser, someone who dreams but never does. Stop. Rachel's voice was sharp. That's Allison talking, not reality. Let me ask you something, Mark. Do you know why I became a physical therapist? The sudden change of subject threw me. Don't think so? Because of you, she said simply. Sophomore year, when I was panicking about my major, unsure what I wanted to do with my life, you were the one who pointed out how much I loved helping your basketball teammates with their injuries. How I was always researching better stretches and recovery techniques. You saw that in me before I saw it in myself. I vaguely remembered the conversation, but had no idea it had been so impactful. I did. You did. And now I have a career I love, helping people every day, because you took the time to really see me. She leaned forward. That's not something a loser does, Mark. That's what a thoughtful, observant, caring person does. The fact that Allison couldn't appreciate those qualities says more about her values than your worth. Her words were like a balm to wounds I hadn't fully acknowledged. Thank you for saying that. I'm not just saying it. It's the truth. She hesitated, then added, you know what the real problem was? You lost yourself in that relationship. You became whatever Allison needed you to be, and in the process, you stopped pursuing your own passions. The observation hit uncomfortably close to home. Maybe, I admitted. But that's on me, not her. True. And recognizing that is the first step toward reclaiming yourself. She smiled. Starting with these brutal workouts, apparently. I laughed. It was a spur-of-the-moment decision. Met Ethan at a bar the night of the breakup. Sometimes the universe puts the right people in your path exactly when you need them, Rachel said, echoing Ethan's earlier sentiment. Speaking of which, what's your plan? Beyond getting fit, I mean. I took a deep breath. I'm thinking about going back to school. Finishing my degree, computer science. That's perfect for you. Her enthusiasm seemed genuine. You've always had a knack for that stuff. Remember when you built that program to help me study anatomy? I'd forgotten about that too. A simple flashcard application I'd created to help Rachel prepare for a particularly difficult exam. It had been a fun project, combining my interest in programming with the satisfaction of helping someone I cared about. I do now, I said, smiling at the memory. Thanks for reminding me. That's what friends are for, she replied. Reminding you who you are when you forget. As we finished our smoothies and prepared to leave, Rachel surprised me by asking, are you free on Saturday? For a non-gym activity, I mean. Probably. I hadn't exactly been maintaining an active social calendar, especially now. Great. There's a tech showcase at the university. Local companies, workshops, networking opportunities. Might be a good way to dip your toe back into that world before you commit to going back to school. She said it casually, as if she wasn't offering me a lifeline to a future I'd almost given up on. That sounds amazing, I said, meaning it. But won't it be awkward? If Allison finds out we're hanging out? Rachel's expression hardened again. Mark, I meant what I said. Allison and I aren't speaking right now. And even if we were, my friendships aren't hers to approve or disapprove of. I've always valued our connection, and I'm not letting her take that away too. Her loyalty was unexpected and deeply touching. Then yes, Saturday sounds great. As we walked to our cars, Rachel surprised me again by giving me a quick, firm hug. I'm proud of you, she said simply, for picking yourself up and moving forward. That takes courage. The hug was brief, but it left a lingering warmth that had nothing to do with physical exertion. Thanks for the stretching lesson, I said. And for everything else. Anytime, she replied with a smile. That's what friends are for. As I drove home, I realized something remarkable. For the past 2 hours, I hadn't thought about Allison's cruel words once. Instead, I'd been fully present, engaged in conversations about the future rather than dwelling on the past. It was a small victory, but a significant one. The universe had indeed put the right people in my path when I needed them most. First Ethan with his no-nonsense approach to physical transformation, and now Rachel, reminding me of the person I used to be before I lost myself in a relationship that had ultimately devalued me. For the first time since the breakup, I went to sleep not with Allison's words echoing in my head, but with Rachel's. "I've always seen you, Mark, even when you didn't see yourself." The rest of the week established a new rhythm to my life. Mornings at Electromart, which I now viewed as a temporary stage rather than a permanent sentence. Evenings with Ethan at the gym, pushing my body to limits I didn't know it had. Nights researching computer science programs, refreshing my coding skills on free online platforms, and meal prepping for the next day. By Friday, the soreness had diminished to a manageable level, and I could see subtle changes when I looked in the mirror. Not in my physique yet, but in my posture, in the way I carried myself. More confident, more purposeful. "Your form is improving already," Ethan noted during our Friday session as I completed a set of dumbbell rows. "Most people take weeks to get this movement right. I have a good teacher," I replied between controlled breaths. "Two, actually. Rachel's tips have been helping a lot." "She seems cool," Ethan said, adjusting the weight on my right side. "Known her long? About 6 years. She was my ex's best friend before." I trailed off, focusing on the exercise instead of the complicated dynamics. "Ah," Ethan said knowingly. "The plot thickens." "It's not like that," I insisted, perhaps too quickly. "We're just friends." "If you say so," Ethan replied, not looking convinced. 2 more reps, then we're moving to shoulders." After the workout, I checked my phone to find a text from Rachel confirming our plans for the tech showcase the next day. "Meet you there at 1? Parking can be a nightmare, so I recommend the structure on 12th Street. I texted back a confirmation, then noticed another message that had come in during my workout. From Doug, my manager. "Got a minute to talk tomorrow morning before your shift?" "Nothing bad, promise." "Curious," I replied affirmatively, then headed home for my now established post-workout routine of protein shake, stretching, I didn't dare skip it now that Rachel had impressed its importance upon me, and a hot shower. Saturday morning found me at Electromart an hour before my shift, sitting in Doug's cluttered office as he shuffled through some papers. "So," he began, "had an interesting call from corporate yesterday. After their visit, they're making some changes to regional structure, closing a few underperforming stores, including ours." I interrupted, my stomach sinking. "Not immediately," Doug said, "but probably within 6 months. However, that's not why I wanted to talk to you." He pushed a document across the desk. "They're creating a new position at the regional office, systems analyst. Basically taking what you did with our inventory system and expanding it company-wide. They asked if I knew anyone with both retail experience and computer skills." He smiled. "I gave them your name." I stared at the job description, momentarily speechless. It was an entry-level corporate position, but with a salary nearly double what I was making now, plus benefits, and most importantly, a foot in the door to the kind of career I'd always wanted, but somehow convinced myself was out of reach. "They want me to apply?" I managed finally. "They specifically asked for you," Doug corrected. "That inventory system you designed made a bigger impression than you realized. They remembered your name." He leaned back in his chair. "It would mean relocating to the regional office in Chicago, though. That might be a deal breaker for you." A month ago, it would have been. A month ago, my entire life was built around being where Allison was, arranging my schedule around hers, limiting my geographic radius to what was convenient for our relationship. Now, actually, I heard myself saying, "Chicago sounds perfect." Doug looked surprised but pleased. "Really? I thought with your girlfriend and everything." "We broke up," I said, the words coming more easily than they had a week ago. "It's a long story, but let's just say I'm open to new opportunities." "In every sense." "Well, hot damn," Doug said with a grin. "In that case, let me put you in direct contact with Melissa in corporate. She's the one who asked about you." He made a note on his desk calendar. "This could be a real turning point for you, Mark." "I think it already is," I replied, a new sense of possibility expanding in my chest. The rest of my shift passed in a blur, my mind racing with the implications of this unexpected opportunity. Chicago, a fresh start in a new city, a job that actually utilized my skills and interests. It was both exhilarating and terrifying to contemplate. By the time I met Rachel at the University Tech Showcase that afternoon, I was bursting with the news. I spotted her waiting near the entrance, wearing jeans and a simple blue top that brought out the warmth in her eyes. She waved when she saw me, her smile brightening. "Mitatim, you're looking better," she observed as I approached. Less like you're being tortured and more like you're actually enjoying the workouts. Stockholm Syndrome, I replied with a grin. My captor has convinced me that pain is progress. She laughed. Well, it's working for you. You're standing taller already. I have news, I said, unable to contain it any longer. I told her about the corporate position, watching her expression shift from surprise to genuine excitement. Mark, that's amazing, she exclaimed when I finished. It's perfect for you, combining your retail experience with your tech skills. And Chicago is such a great city. You've been? A few times for conferences. The lakefront is beautiful, and the tech scene there is really growing. She hesitated. When would you have to move? If I get it, probably within a month or two. But there's no guarantee. You'll get it, she interrupted confidently. They asked for you specifically, Mark. That doesn't happen by accident. Her faith in me was both touching and disorienting. I wasn't used to someone believing in my abilities so completely, especially not recently. Thanks, I said simply. I'm trying not to get too excited, but you are, she finished for me, smiling. As you should be. This is what happens when you start believing in yourself again. The universe responds. The tech showcase turned out to be exactly what I needed. A glimpse into the world I'd always wanted to be part of, but had somehow let slip away. We wandered through exhibits from local tech companies, attended a workshop on emerging programming languages, and even participated in a coding challenge that, to my surprise, I didn't completely fail at. You picked that up really quickly, Rachel observed after the challenge. Some of those concepts were pretty advanced. It's coming back to me, I admitted. I've been practicing online in the evenings. Between workouts and meal prep and your job, when do you sleep? I shrugged. Sleep is for the weak. And for people who aren't trying to prove their ex wrong about being a perpetual loser, I meant it as a joke. But Rachel's expression turned serious. Is that what this is about? Proving Allison wrong? The question made me pause. Was that my motivation? Spite rather than self-improvement? Maybe at first. I admitted as we found seats in the university's outdoor courtyard. When Ethan talked about the best revenge is living well, that resonated. But now, I thought about the excitement I'd felt reading the job description, coding in the evenings, even pushing through the pain of workouts. Now it feels like I'm finally doing what I should have been doing all along. For me, not against her. Rachel nodded, seeming satisfied with the answer. That's the difference between motivation and inspiration. Motivation, especially the kind that comes from anger or proving someone wrong, can get you started, but it burns out fast. Inspiration comes from within. It's sustainable. When did you get so wise? I asked, only half joking. Therapy, she replied candidly. 2 years of it. Best investment I ever made. I raised an eyebrow. I didn't know you were in therapy. There's a lot we don't know about each other, despite being in adjacent orbits for 6 years. She looked at me thoughtfully. Most of our interactions were filtered through Allison. She was right. Despite considering Rachel a friend, our relationship had always been secondary to my relationship with Allison. We rarely spent time together without Allison present, and when we did, the conversation usually centered around her in some way. That's changing now, I observed. It is, she agreed, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. For the better, I think. As the afternoon wore on, I found myself increasingly aware of Rachel in ways I'd never allowed myself to be before. The way she listened intently when I spoke about coding, asking insightful questions. How animated she became describing a particularly challenging case at her physical therapy practice. The light dusting of freckles across her nose that intensified in the sunshine. We ended the day at a small cafe near campus, discussing everything from the showcase to books we'd recently read to our favorite podcasts. Conversation flowed effortlessly, without the careful monitoring I'd grown accustomed to with Allison, where certain topics were off limits or certain opinions were expected. I should probably head home, Rachel said eventually, glancing at her watch. I promised my sister I'd video chat with her tonight. She just had a baby. You're an aunt now, I said, smiling. That's great. Boy or girl? Girl, Olivia. Rachel's face softened. She's perfect. All tiny fingers and fuzzy hair and that new baby smell. Send my congratulations to your sister, I said, realizing as I did that I knew very little about Rachel's family despite our years of acquaintance. Another thing filtered through Allison, who had never been particularly interested in Rachel's family dynamics. As we walked to the parking structure, Rachel asked, "So what's next on your transformation journey? Beyond waiting to hear about the job, I mean. Apartment hunting in Chicago, maybe, just to get a feel for the market." I hesitated, then added, and I enrolled in an online course to refresh my programming skills. Starts Monday. Look at you, not waiting for permission to move forward, she said approvingly. The old Mark would have waited to hear about the job before taking any other steps. The old Mark was afraid of disappointment, I admitted. Now I'm more afraid of stagnation. We reached her car first. As she unlocked it, she turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. I've really enjoyed today, Mark. It's been nice getting to know you. The real you, not just Allison's boyfriend. I've enjoyed it too, I said sincerely. More than I expected to. She seemed about to say something else, then changed her mind. Good luck with the job application. Text me when you submit it. I will, I promised. And thanks for today. For all of it, the showcase, the company, the perspective. She smiled, and for a moment, something hung in the air between us. A possibility, perhaps, or just the awareness of a connection deepening beyond its previous boundaries. See you Monday? She asked. At the gym? I'll be there, I confirmed. Probably still making pathetic noises during squats, but I'll be there. Her laugh followed me as I walked to my own car, a sound that somehow managed to both settle and unsettle me at the same time. Driving home, I reflected on the drastic changes in my life over just 1 week. From the devastating breakup to a potential new job in a new city, from seeing myself through Allison's dismissive eyes to beginning to recognize my own value, from loneliness to whatever this evolving friendship with Rachel was becoming. You'll always be a loser, Mark. The words still came to me sometimes, but they were fainter now, more like an echo from a past I was rapidly leaving behind rather than a prophecy about my future. In their place was a growing conviction that Allison had been wrong. Not just cruel, but fundamentally incorrect in her assessment of who I was and what I was capable of. And that realization, more than any external change, felt like the true beginning of my transformation. The following weeks unfolded with a momentum that both exhilarated and occasionally overwhelmed me. I submitted my application for the systems analyst position, complete with a portfolio of my previous work and a confident cover letter that Rachel helped me craft. No self-deprecation, she'd insisted. You're not apologizing for applying. You're explaining why they'd be lucky to have you. My workouts with Ethan progressed from pure torture to something approaching enjoyment as my body adapted and my strength increased. The changes were subtle at first. More energy throughout the day, clothes fitting slightly differently, fewer struggles with the last few reps of each exercise. But by the third week, others were noticing too. Have you lost weight? Jen asked at work, studying me as I restocked the display. A few pounds, I admitted. It'd been working out. It suits you, she said with an approving nod. You look more present somehow. Present. It was an apt description for how I felt, fully inhabiting my body and my life in a way I hadn't for years. No longer drifting through days on autopilot, waiting for some future point when things would magically improve. Rachel had become a regular fixture in my new routine. What started as occasional post-workout smoothies evolved into shared meals, weekend hikes, and marathon coding sessions where she'd read while I worked through my online course assignments. Her presence was both calming and energizing, a combination I hadn't experienced before. You're picking this up really quickly, she observed one Sunday afternoon as I completed a particularly challenging programming module. We were sitting in a quiet corner of a local coffee shop, my laptop open between us. It's like riding a bicycle, I replied. Wobbly at first, but the muscle memory is still there. I'm impressed, and a little jealous. My brain doesn't work that way, says the woman who can name every bone, muscle, and ligament in the human body from memory. She laughed. Different kinds of intelligence. I've always admired the way you think, how you can see systems and patterns. The compliment warmed me in a way that was becoming familiar. Rachel had a gift for noticing and articulating the things I did well, not in a flattering or exaggerated way, but with a matter-of-fact appreciation that made it easier to believe her. 3 weeks after submitting my application, I received a call from Melissa at corporate, inviting me for an in-person interview in Chicago the following week. The news sent a jolt of both excitement and anxiety through me. They want me to prepare a presentation. I told Rachel that evening, as we walked along the river path near her apartment, on how I'd implement a company-wide inventory system based on what I designed for our store. That's perfect, she said enthusiastically. You already know the system inside and out. You just need to scale it up. I've never given a corporate presentation before, I admitted. What if I freeze? What if they ask questions I can't answer? Rachel stopped walking and turned to face me directly. Mark, listen to me. You designed that system because you saw a problem and knew how to fix it. Not because anyone asked you to, not because it was part of your job description, but because that's who you are. Someone who sees solutions where others see obstacles. That's what they want. That's why they asked for you specifically. Her confidence in me was still disorienting at times, but I was learning to absorb it rather than deflect it. You're right, I conceded. I know this material. I can do this. Of course you can. She resumed walking. And I'll help you practice the presentation until you could deliver it in your sleep. True to her word, Rachel spent the next several evenings helping me refine my presentation, playing the role of skeptical executives, asking tough questions, timing me to ensure I stayed within the allotted 30 minutes, and offering constructive feedback on everything from my slides to my body language. Stand up straighter, she advised during one run-through. You tend to hunch your shoulders when you're nervous. It makes you look uncertain. I adjusted my posture, conscious of how different my body felt after nearly a month of consistent training. Stronger, more solid. Darn, better? Much. She nodded approvingly. Now try the transition to the cost analysis section again, but this time, make eye contact before you change slides. Her attention to detail was impressive, and I found myself growing more confident with each practice session. By the time my interview day arrived, I felt as prepared as I could possibly be. The night before my flight to Chicago, Rachel invited me over for dinner. A proper meal before your big day, she insisted. Her apartment was warm and inviting, with comfortable furniture, well-stocked bookshelves, and houseplants thriving in every available space. It felt lived in and personal in a way that Allison's meticulously decorated place never had. I made chicken piccata. She called from the kitchen as I explored her living room, examining the framed photos on her walls. Rachel with her family, with friends I didn't recognize, hiking in what looked like the Grand Canyon. Hope that works for your pre-interview nutrition plan. Sounds perfect. I replied, pausing at a photo of Rachel and Allison from what must have been their college days, arms around each other's shoulders, laughing at the camera. It was strange to see Allison's face after nearly a month of not thinking about her much at all. You still have pictures of you and Allison up? Rachel appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. 7 years of friendship doesn't disappear overnight, even when you're furious with someone. She came to stand beside me looking at the photo. That was sophomore year, spring break in Florida. You were close, I observed. We were, she agreed. But people change. Or maybe they don't change so much as reveal who they've been all along. She shrugged. Either way, the Allison I knew at 20 isn't the Allison who exists now. Do you miss her? I asked, curious about the complex emotions Rachel must be navigating. Losing her best friend while deepening her friendship with me. Potentially caught between loyalties. I miss who I thought she was, Rachel said after a moment's reflection. But I don't regret standing up for what I believe was right. She turned to me, her expression serious. Life's too short to compromise your values, even for people you love. The moment felt significant, weighted with unspoken meanings. I wanted to ask more, about her values, about how she saw me, about the subtle shift I'd felt in our interactions lately. But the timer in the kitchen went off, breaking the tension. That's the bread, Rachel said, returning to the kitchen. Hope you're hungry. Dinner was delicious. The conversation easy as we deliberately avoided further discussion of my interview. Or Allison, focusing instead on Rachel's latest challenging patient, a funny story about her new nephew's first attempt at solid food, and her upcoming weekend plans to help her brother move. He's hopeless at organization, she explained as we cleaned up afterward. Last time he moved, he packed his silverware with his bathroom supplies and couldn't find either for a week. Sounds like my first apartment after college, I admitted. I lived out of boxes for a month because I couldn't be bothered to unpack properly. Well, when you move to Chicago, I'm coming over to make sure you set up correctly from day one, she said, then seemed to catch herself. I mean, if you want, and if the timing works out before she stopped abruptly. Before you what? I prompted, curious about her sudden hesitation. Rachel busied herself with wiping down the counter. Nothing important, just some potential changes coming up at work. She changed the subject quickly. What time is your flight tomorrow? I let her redirect the conversation, though I sensed there was something she wasn't telling me. 7 a.m. Car service picking me up at 5. Brutal, she sympathized. But at least you'll have the whole day there before your interview on Wednesday. Yeah, I'm planning to explore some neighborhoods, get a feel for where I might want to live. The reality of potentially relocating was becoming more concrete with each passing day. It's strange to think about starting over somewhere new. Exciting but intimidating. Rachel leaned against the counter, studying me. You know what I've noticed about you these past few weeks, Mark? You're embracing the unfamiliar instead of avoiding it. The old you would have been paralyzed by the thought of moving to a new city alone. The old me was afraid of a lot of things. I acknowledged. Change. Failure. Being alone. I smiled ruefully. Turns out being alone isn't nearly as scary as being with someone who makes you feel lonely. That's profound, Rachel said softly. And true. As the evening wound down and I prepared to leave, Rachel surprised me with a small gift bag. A little something for your trip, she explained. Inside was a leather portfolio embossed with my initials. For your presentation materials, she said, so you look as professional as you are. The thoughtfulness of the gift touched me deeply. Rachel, thank you. Really, you're going to be amazing, she said with quiet certainty. They'd be fools not to hire you on the spot. Standing in her doorway, I felt an overwhelming urge to hug her, to express physically the gratitude and affection that had been growing steadily over these weeks. Before I could overthink it, I stepped forward and wrapped my arms around her. She returned the embrace without hesitation, her arms encircling my waist, her head fitting perfectly against my shoulder. We stood like that for several heartbeats, neither rushing to break the contact. When we finally separated, her cheeks were flushed, her eyes bright. Text me when you land? She asked. I will, I promised. And Rachel, thank you for everything. These past weeks, I don't know what I would have done without you. You would have been fine, she said with characteristic generosity. But I'm glad I could help. The drive home was filled with thoughts of Rachel, her unwavering support, her keen insights, the way her apartment felt more like home than any place I'd been recently. And beneath those thoughts, a growing awareness that my feelings for her had evolved far beyond friendship. The realization should have been alarming. Too soon after Allison, too complicated given their history, too risky when my life was already in flux. Instead, it felt like acknowledging something that had been true for longer than I'd allowed myself to recognize. But Chicago loomed. A new job if I got it, a new city, a new life that would take me hundreds of miles away from Rachel, just as I was discovering how important she was to me. I pushed the thoughts aside as I packed for my trip, one major life change at a time. First, I needed to secure this job. Everything else would have to wait. Chicago in early summer was vibrant and energetic, the lakefront glittering in the sunshine, the streets bustling with activity. I spent my first day exploring neighborhoods that might become my new home. Lincoln Park, with its leafy streets and converted brownstones, Wicker Park's hip cafes and music venues, the South Loop's proximity to both downtown and the lake. I sent Rachel photos throughout the day. The Cloud Gate sculpture in Millennium Park, a particularly impressive view of the Chicago River, a quirky bookstore I'd stumbled upon that I knew she'd love. Her responses were enthusiastic but briefer than usual, which I attributed to her busy schedule at the clinic. My hotel was downtown, walking distance from the Electromart corporate offices where I'd have my interview the following morning. After grabbing dinner at a nearby restaurant, I spent the evening in my room, reviewing my presentation one final time, then FaceTiming with Ethan for a pep talk. Remember, you're not just there to answer their questions, he advised. You're there to evaluate if this is the right move for you too. It's a two-way street. That's a good perspective, I admitted. I've been so focused on impressing them, I haven't thought much about whether the position is actually what I want. Well, is it? Ethan asked bluntly. I considered the question seriously. It's a huge step up from where I am now. Better pay, better title, work that actually interests me. But is it your end goal or a stepping stone? Another good question. A stepping stone, I think. Ultimately, I'd like to finish my degree and move into pure software development. But this would give me corporate experience, connections, maybe even tuition assistance. Ethan nodded approvingly. That's the kind of clarity you need. Helps you make decisions from a position of strategy rather than desperation. After we hung up, I texted Rachel. Presentation reviewed one last time. As ready as I'll ever be. How was your day? Her response came quickly this time. Busy but good. Sorry for the short replies earlier. You'll do great tomorrow. They'd be crazy not to hire you. I smiled at her confidence, then added, Miss you. It was the first time I'd said anything like that to her. And as soon as I sent it, I wondered if it was too much. too soon. But her reply made my heart rate pick up slightly. Miss you too. It's strange how quickly someone can become an important part of your daily life. We texted back and forth for another hour, discussing everything from my neighborhood explorations to a difficult patient she'd worked with that day. It felt comfortable and exciting at the same time, this new dimension to our relationship unfolding naturally despite the physical distance. Finally, knowing I needed sleep before my big day, I reluctantly said goodnight. Her final text read, "Whatever happens tomorrow, I'm proud of you for taking this chance on yourself. Sleep well." I fell asleep with those words in my mind, a sense of calm confidence replacing the nervous energy that had driven me throughout the day. The interview itself went better than I could have hoped. Melissa, my corporate contact, met me in the lobby of the sleek downtown office building and escorted me to a conference room where 4 other executives waited. I recognized the chief information officer from company newsletters, but the others were unfamiliar. "Mark, thanks for making the trip." Melissa began after introductions. "We've been impressed with your application and portfolio. Today, we'd like to hear more about your inventory system and how you envision scaling it company-wide." Taking a deep breath, I opened the leather portfolio Rachel had given me and began my presentation. The nerves I'd anticipated never materialized. Instead, I found myself speaking confidently about the system I designed, the problems it solved, and the potential benefits of implementing it across all stores. The executives asked thoughtful questions that I was prepared to answer, thanks to Rachel's thorough preparation sessions. When the CIO raised concerns about implementation costs, I was ready with a detailed breakdown showing the potential savings over a 2-year period. "This is impressive work, especially considering it wasn't part of your job description." He commented, "What motivated you to create this system in the first place?" The question gave me a moment's pause. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because I suddenly recognized how much my perspective had shifted in recent weeks. "I saw a problem that needed solving," I said simply. "Our outdated system was causing inventory discrepancies that frustrated both staff and customers. I knew there had to be a better way, so I built one." I smiled slightly. "I guess I've always been drawn to creating systems that work better than the ones they're replacing." The interview concluded with a tour of the office and a casual lunch with Melissa, during which she asked about my willingness to relocate and my long-term career goals. To be completely transparent, I told her, "I see this position as an excellent next step, but I also plan to complete my computer science degree. My hope would be to grow within the company, potentially moving towards software development roles as my skills advance." Rather than being put off by my ambition, Melissa seemed pleased. "We appreciate that kind of honesty, Mark. Too many candidates say whatever they think we want to hear. And for what it's worth, we have a tuition reimbursement program that might interest you." By the time I boarded my flight home that evening, I felt cautiously optimistic. The interview had gone well, the position seemed like a good fit, and Chicago had felt energizing in a way my current city hadn't in years. The only cloud on the horizon was the thought of leaving Rachel behind, just as our relationship was evolving into something new and promising. I hadn't allowed myself to fully explore these feelings yet, partly out of fear of complicating a valuable friendship, of misreading signals, of being rejected, and partly because the timing seemed all wrong. Starting a new relationship just before potentially moving to another city felt unfair to both of us. Rachel was waiting at the airport when I landed, surprising me completely. I spotted her as I exited the security area, holding a small sign that read "Future Systems Analyst," with a question mark after it. "What are you doing here?" I asked, unable to contain my smile as I approached. "Couldn't wait to hear how it went," she replied, giving me a quick hug. "And I figured you'd be too tired to drive safely." The thoughtfulness of the gesture was typical Rachel, but it affected me more deeply than usual. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to," she said simply. "Now details, please. How did it go?" We talked nonstop during the drive from the airport, my energy returning as I recounted the interview, the office, the executives' responses to my presentation. Rachel listened attentively, asking insightful questions and celebrating each positive sign. "They'd be absolute idiots not to hire you," she declared as we pulled up to my apartment building. "When do you expect to hear back?" Melissa said they're interviewing 2 other candidates this week, so probably by early next week. I gathered my small suitcase from the back seat. "Want to come up for a bit? I brought you something from Chicago." Rachel hesitated, glancing at her watch. "I really should get home. Early patient tomorrow." She seemed uncharacteristically nervous. "But I'd love my souvenir." I retrieved the small package from my carry-on, a book of photography I'd found in that quirky bookstore, featuring striking black and white images of Chicago's architecture. Reminded me of those photos you have in your hallway, I explained as she unwrapped it. Mark, this is beautiful, she said, flipping through the pages. You remembered my photography collection? Of course, I replied. Your eye for composition is amazing. I've always admired those prints. She looked up at me, something vulnerable in her expression. Thank you. This is really thoughtful. There was a moment, brief but electric, where it felt like we were on the precipice of something important. But then Rachel glanced at her watch again, and the moment passed. I really should go, she said, sounding genuinely regretful. But I want to hear more about Chicago. Lunch tomorrow? Definitely. I agreed, trying not to show my disappointment. And Rachel? Thanks again for picking me up. For everything, really. She smiled, a mix of emotions crossing her face. That's what friends are for, right? Friends? The word hung between us, simultaneously true and insufficient. As I watched her drive away, I wondered if I was imagining the subtle shift in our interactions, reading romance into a friendship because I was finally ready to move on from Allison. But alone in my apartment, unpacking my suitcase, I knew that wasn't the case. My feelings for Rachel had evolved naturally and inevitably, building on a foundation of genuine connection rather than physical attraction alone. The question was whether she felt the same way, and whether either of us was brave enough to risk disrupting the comfortable pattern we'd established. Those questions would have to wait, I decided, as exhaustion finally caught up with me. For now, I needed sleep, and in the morning, I'd face whatever came next. Job offer or rejection, potential romance or continued friendship, with the same determination that had carried me through the past month of transformation. The next few days settled back into our established routine. Work at Electromart, workouts with Ethan, evenings spent coding or hanging out with Rachel. But there was an underlying tension now, an awareness of pending change that colored every interaction. When do you think you'll hear about the job? Ethan asked during our Friday session as I completed a set of bench presses. Any day now, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady despite the weight pressing on my chest. They said early next week, which could mean Monday. And if you get it, they'd want me to start in 3 weeks. I pushed the barbell up for the final rep, arms shaking with effort. Enough time to give notice and find a place in Chicago. Ethan helped me rack the weight, then sat on the adjacent bench. How's Rachel taking the potential move? I wiped my face with a towel, buying time before answering. We haven't really talked about it. Not directly. Might want to fix that, Ethan suggested, before decisions get made that affect both of you. It's complicated, I said, aware of how evasive I sounded. We're friends. Good friends. But you have feelings for her, and you're pretty sure she has feelings for you, yet neither of you has the guts to say it out loud. Ethan's bluntness was both annoying and refreshing. Meanwhile, you might move to another city in 3 weeks. Put that way, my hesitation seemed ridiculous. When did you get so insightful about relationships? I asked, deflecting slightly. I told you I was engaged once, he reminded me. What I didn't tell you was that she only left because I refused to have an honest conversation about our future. I was comfortable, complacent. Sorry, thought things would just work themselves out. He shook his head. They don't. Not the important things. His words stayed with me through the rest of our workout and into the evening. Rachel and I had plans to see a movie, our usual Friday night activity since my transformation journey began. As I showered and changed after the gym, I decided Ethan was right. We needed to have an honest conversation, regardless of how uncomfortable it might be. But when Rachel picked me up, something was off. Her usual warmth was muted, her conversation stilted in a way that wasn't typical for her. Everything okay? I asked as we drove to the theater. Fine, she replied too quickly. Just a long day at work. How was your workout? I let her change the subject, filing away the concern for later. Throughout the movie, an action comedy neither of us was particularly invested in, I was acutely aware of her beside me, the careful space she maintained between us, the way she seemed to be deliberately avoiding our usual casual contact. When she suggested grabbing coffee after the movie instead of our usual dinner, alarm bells really started ringing. Coffee meant a shorter, more controlled interaction. It meant she had something to say that she didn't want dragged out over a leisurely meal. The cafe was quiet for a Friday night, allowing us to claim a corner table away from other patrons. Rachel fidgeted with her cup, uncharacteristically nervous. So, she began after an awkward silence. I have some news. My stomach dropped. Okay, I've been offered a position at a rehabilitation center in Denver. The words came out in a rush. It's an amazing opportunity. Working with elite athletes, cutting-edge facilities, significantly better pay. I'd be leading my own team. Wow. I managed genuine happiness for her professional achievement, warring with the sudden hollowness in my chest. Rachel, that's incredible. Congratulations. Thank you, she said, still not meeting my eyes. I've been interviewing for a while, but I didn't want to say anything until it was official. So that explained her occasional cryptic comments, the hesitations, the sense that she was holding something back. When would you start? That's the thing. She finally looked up. They want me there in 2 weeks. I'd have to give notice at the clinic immediately, pack up my apartment, find a place in Denver. She trailed off, then added softly, it's all happening very fast. 2 weeks. Even if I got the Chicago job, she'd be gone before I left. The realization hit me with unexpected force. Not just the timing, but the fact that we'd both been secretly pursuing opportunities that would take us in different directions without discussing it with each other. You don't seem happy about it, I observed, studying her expression. I am, she insisted. It's what I've been working toward for years. The chance to specialize in sports medicine, to work with professional athletes. She hesitated. It's just complicated. Because of us. I said, the words escaping before I could reconsider. Rachel's eyes widened slightly. Is there an us, Mark? We've never really defined what's been happening between us these past few weeks. It was a fair question, and one I'd been avoiding. I don't know, I admitted. I know how I feel, but I've been hesitant to say anything because everything in my life is in flux right now. And because of Allison. What about Allison? Rachel asked, her tone carefully neutral. Not because I'm still hung up on her, I clarified quickly, but because you were her friend first. Because it might seem like I'm, I don't know, transferring feelings or rebounding or trying to get back at her in some convoluted way. Is that what this has been? The vulnerability in Rachel's voice made my chest ache. No, I said firmly. Absolutely not. My feelings for you have nothing to do with Allison. If anything, they predated the breakup. But I never allowed myself to acknowledge them because I was committed to her. I took a deep breath. The truth is, I've been falling for you, Rachel. I just wasn't sure if the timing was right to say anything. Her expression softened, relief and something warmer replacing the tension. I've been falling for you too, she admitted quietly. But I was afraid you weren't ready, that you were still healing from Allison's cruelty. And then this Denver opportunity came up. And I didn't know how to tell you I might be leaving just when things were evolving between us. The mutual confession hung between us, both liberating and complicated by the realities we faced. Denver and Chicago, 2 dream opportunities in different cities. A relationship just beginning that would immediately become long distance if we pursued it. So what do we do now? I asked, reaching across the table to take her hand. Denver isn't Chicago. No, it's not. She agreed, her fingers entwining with mine. But it's a 2-hour flight. Weekend visits would be possible. She squeezed my hand. Unless you think that's crazy, starting something that would immediately become long distance. I considered the question seriously. 6 weeks ago, I might have dismissed the idea as impractical. Too difficult, not worth the effort. But the man I was becoming thought differently about challenges. I think, I said slowly, that something real is worth pursuing, regardless of the obstacles. And what's between us feels very real to me. Rachel's smile was like sunrise breaking through clouds. It feels real to me too. So we try, I said simply. You go to Denver, I hopefully go to Chicago, and we see each other whenever we can. We talk every day. We make it work until we figure out a more permanent solution. That sounds suspiciously like a plan. Rachel teased, but her eyes were bright with emotion. A real plan, not just wishful thinking. I'm trying this new thing where I actually pursue what I want instead of just dreaming about it. I replied with a smile. Seems to be working out so far. The tension that had defined the evening dissolved, replaced by a new kind of energy. The excitement of possibility, the relief of feelings acknowledged and returned, the determination to make something work despite challenges. When Rachel drove me home later, the goodbye at my door was different than all the previous ones. No more careful distance, no more uncertainty about boundaries. When I leaned in to kiss her, it felt like the most natural progression imaginable, as if we'd been moving toward this moment since that first smoothie after my workout weeks ago. Her lips were soft against mine, her hand coming up to rest against my chest, right over my heart. The kiss was gentle, exploratory, a beginning rather than a culmination. When we pulled apart, her smile was both shy and radiant. "I've been wanting to do that for a while," I admitted. "Me too," she replied. "Longer than you might think." As she left, promising to call me the next day to make plans for the weekend, I felt a strange mixture of emotions. Elation at this new development between us, anxiety about the impending distance, and lingering disbelief at how dramatically my life had changed since that devastating evening when Allison had dismissed me as a permanent loser. In just 6 weeks, I'd transformed physically, emotionally, and mentally. I'd rediscovered passions I'd let fade, reconnected with the ambition I'd once had, and found a relationship based on mutual respect and genuine admiration rather than convenience or comfort. And none of it would have happened if Allison hadn't delivered those cruel words that had initially shattered me, but ultimately freed me to become someone new, someone better, stronger, and more authentic than I'd been in years. "You'll always be a loser, Mark." The words no longer had power over me. They were just sounds from the past, irrelevant to the man I was becoming and the future I was creating for myself. As I fell asleep that night, my thoughts were filled not with bitterness toward Allison, but with gratitude for the unexpected path her rejection had set me on. A path that led to Rachel, to Chicago, and to a version of myself I could finally be proud of. Monday morning brought the email I'd been both anticipating and dreading. An offer for the systems analyst position in Chicago, with a salary that exceeded even my optimistic expectations and benefits that included the tuition reimbursement Melissa had mentioned. They wanted an answer within 48 hours and a start date in exactly 3 weeks. I forwarded the email to Rachel immediately, adding, "It's happening. All of it." Her response came minutes later. "Congratulations! I never doubted you for a second. Call me as soon as you can." The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. I gave notice at Electromart, where Doug congratulated me sincerely while lamenting the loss of his most reliable employee. I began researching apartments in Chicago more seriously, narrowing my search to neighborhoods that balanced affordability with proximity to the corporate office. And I spent every available moment with Rachel, both of us acutely aware that our time together in the same city was rapidly dwindling. I found a sublease in Lincoln Park. I told her as we packed boxes in my apartment one evening, 3-month minimum, which gives me time to find something more permanent once I'm settled in the job. "That's perfect," she said, carefully wrapping a framed photo of my family in bubble wrap. "And Lincoln Park is beautiful. Great running paths along the lake. How's your apartment hunting going?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual despite the persistent ache that accompanied any mention of her impending move. "I think I found a place," she replied, her expression brightening. "It's a little farther from the rehab center than I'd like, but it has this amazing view of the mountains and a fitness center in the building." We were both trying so hard to be positive, to focus on the exciting opportunities ahead rather than the distance that would soon separate us. But occasionally reality would pierce through the optimism, leaving momentary silences heavy with unspoken concerns. "It's only a 2-hour flight," Rachel reminded me as we took a break from packing, sitting on my half-empty couch. "And Chicago has direct flights to Denver constantly. And we have phones and FaceTime and text messaging," I added. "People make long-distance work all the time." "Exactly," she agreed, though I noticed she was folding and refolding the same piece of packing paper, a nervous habit I'd come to recognize. "And it's not forever, just until we figure out the next step." The next step, we hadn't defined what that might be, both of us cautious about placing too much pressure on a relationship that was still so new. Despite the depth of our connection, would one of us eventually relocate again to be with the other? Would we find a third city that offered opportunities for both our careers? These were questions for the future, not the present. Saturday marked Rachel's last night in town. She'd be driving to Denver the next morning, her car packed with essentials while movers handled the bulk of her belongings. We decided to make the evening special. Dinner at an upscale restaurant neither of us had visited before. A celebration of both our new beginnings and the relationship we were committed to nurturing despite the distance. Rachel looked stunning in a simple blue dress that brought out the warmth in her eyes, her auburn hair loose around her shoulders instead of in its usual practical ponytail. I'd made an effort too, wearing the new suit I'd purchased for my Chicago interviews, conscious of how differently it fit my transformed physique. "You clean up nice," she observed as I opened her car door, her appreciative gaze making me stand a little taller. "Not so bad yourself," I replied, the understatement deliberate. In truth, she took my breath away. Not just her physical beauty, which had always been evident, but the complete package of who she was. Brilliant, kind, supportive, yet challenging, and now mine to admire openly. The restaurant was elegant without being stuffy, with intimate lighting and tables spaced far enough apart for private conversation. We ordered wine, toasting our respective new beginnings and the unexpected relationship that had blossomed between us. If someone had told me 2 months ago that I'd be sitting here with you like this, Rachel mused, I would have thought they were crazy, not because I didn't want it, but because it seemed impossible. Because of Allison, I said, the name no longer carrying the emotional charge it once had. Partly, Rachel admitted, but also because you never seemed to see me that way. I was always just Allison's friend to you. Not always, I corrected gently. I noticed you from the beginning, Rachel. I just pushed those feelings aside because I was with Allison, and that felt like the honorable thing to do. She looked surprised. You noticed me? When? The first time we met at that party freshman year, you were wearing a green sweater and talking about a biomechanics class you were excited about. Your enthusiasm was captivating. I smiled at the memory. But Allison made her interest clear that same night, and once we started dating, I put any attraction to you firmly in the forbidden category. I had no idea, Rachel said softly. I always thought that I was oblivious. I finished for her. Not oblivious, just committed to the choice I'd made. I reached across the table to take her hand. But if I'm being completely honest, there were moments over the years, moments when you'd say something particularly insightful, or laugh in a certain way, or show kindness when it wasn't expected, that I'd find myself wondering what it might have been like if things had gone differently. Rachel's expression was a mixture of wonder and affection. I had those moments too, she confessed. More than I should have, considering you were with my best friend. It's why I kept a certain distance sometimes. I didn't fully trust myself. The revelation was both surprising and deeply moving. The idea that we'd both been aware of each other on a level neither acknowledged, both honoring boundaries out of respect for Allison and our own integrity. Well, I said, raising my wine glass again, here's to second chances and paths not taken the first time around. To us, Rachel replied, touching her glass to mine, her eyes holding promises neither of us needed to verbalize. After dinner, neither of us ready for the evening to end. We walked along the riverfront, the city lights reflecting on the water, a gentle breeze carrying hints of the approaching summer. Rachel's hand fit perfectly in mine, our pace unhurried as we savored these final hours together. I have something for you, I said as we paused at a viewpoint overlooking the water. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a small box. It's not what you might think, I added quickly, seeing her momentary wide-eyed expression. We're not quite there yet. She laughed, relaxing. Thank goodness. I was about to question your judgment. I opened the box to reveal a delicate silver bracelet with a small compass charm. It's a reminder, I explained as I fastened it around her wrist, that no matter how far apart we are physically, we're still moving in the same direction. From finding our way together, Rachel's eyes glistened in the dim light. It's perfect, she whispered, touching the tiny compass with her fingertip. Thank you. I have something for you too, she said, reaching into her small purse. She pulled out a flat package wrapped in simple blue paper. It's not as elegant as yours, but I unwrapped it carefully to find a leather-bound journal, its cover embossed with a simple mountain range silhouette. Open it, she urged. Inside on the first page, she'd written, for recording the journey from who you were to who you're becoming. The view from the mountaintop is worth the climb. I thought you could use it to document this time of transformation, she explained. The physical changes, the career milestones, the move to Chicago, all of it. The thoughtfulness of the gift touched me deeply. I love it, I said sincerely, and I'll use it every day. You'd better, she replied with a smile. I expect full reports on your Chicago adventures between our visits. The mention of our impending separation cast a brief shadow over the moment. In less than 12 hours, Rachel would be driving west while my path continued to point east toward Chicago. The physical distance felt suddenly, painfully real. Hey, Rachel said softly, reading my expression. We're going to make this work. I believe that, Mark. Do you? I looked at her. This amazing woman who had seen value in me even when I couldn't see it myself, who had helped me rebuild my confidence and rediscover my ambitions, who was now prepared to navigate a challenging, long-distance relationship because she believed what we had was worth the effort. I do, I said with absolute certainty. We've both spent too long settling. You for a career that didn't challenge you enough, me for a relationship that diminished rather than elevated me. Neither of us is settling anymore. We're choosing what we want and figuring out how to make it work, whatever it takes. Rachel reached up to touch my face, her palm warm against my cheek. When did you get so wise? She teased, echoing a question she'd asked me weeks ago. I had a good teacher, I replied, leaning down to kiss her. This kiss was different from our previous ones. Deeper, more certain, carrying promises of what awaited us beyond this moment of temporary separation. When we finally broke apart, Rachel's eyes were bright with both happiness and unshed tears. Take me home, she said softly. The night that followed was both an ending and a beginning. A goodbye to our time in the same city and a commitment to the connection that would sustain us through the distance. In Rachel's arms, I found a belonging I'd never experienced before. A sense that I was exactly where I was meant to be, with exactly the right person, regardless of the geographic challenges ahead. Morning came too quickly. The sunrise streaming through Rachel's curtains, illuminating her partially packed apartment with golden light. We'd agreed I wouldn't accompany her to the highway. No prolonged, tearful goodbyes in a rest stop parking lot. Instead, we'd say farewell here, in the privacy of the home she was leaving behind. Call me when you stop for the night, I said as we stood by her packed car, my arms around her waist, reluctant to let go. And when you reach Denver, and after you've unpacked, and every day, she promised, rising on tiptoes to kiss me one more time. Every single day. Watching her drive away was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. But as her car disappeared around the corner, I felt not despair but determination. This was not an ending, but a continuation. A new chapter in a story that had only just begun. Back in my own apartment, surrounded by half-packed boxes and the physical evidence of my impending move, I opened the journal Rachel had given me. On the first blank page after her inscription, I began to write. 6 weeks ago, Allison told me I would always be a loser. Today, I'm preparing to move to Chicago for a job that values my skills and ideas. I've transformed my body, rediscovered my passion for technology, and fallen in love with a woman who sees me clearly and loves what she sees. This journey began with heartbreak, but it's leading to a life more authentic and fulfilling than the one I lost. The best revenge isn't getting even. It's becoming the person you were always meant to be. I paused, pen hovering over the page, then added one final thought. P.S. Rachel flies to Chicago in 2 weeks for our first long-distance visit. I've already bought tickets to an architecture boat tour that I know she'll love. This isn't the end of our story. It's barely the beginning. Closing the journal, I returned to the task of packing, each item I wrapped and boxed representing not just a physical move, but a psychological one, from the man I had been to the man I was becoming. A man who pursued his ambitions rather than just dreaming about them. A man who recognized his own worth rather than measuring it through someone else's eyes. A man who wasn't afraid to love boldly, even when the path forward wasn't perfectly clear. Allison's words had once cut deeply. You'll always be a loser, Mark. But now they were just a footnote in a story that had taken an unexpected and wonderful turn. A story still being written, one day, one challenge, one triumph at a time. Part 2. Chicago in late summer was a different city than the one I'd first visited for my interview. The lakefront hummed with activity, street festivals filled neighborhoods with music and food, and the city seemed to vibrate with possibilities. I'd been in my new position at Electromark Corporate for just over a month, and despite the initial learning curve, I was thriving in ways I hadn't thought possible. My small sublet in Lincoln Park had become home faster than expected, partly because I'd made an effort to actually decorate and organize rather than living out of boxes, and partly because Rachel's influence had made me more intentional about creating a space that reflected the person I was becoming rather than the one I'd been. Show me around again, Rachel requested during our nightly video call, her face slightly pixelated, but her smile as warm as ever, despite the digital distance between Chicago and Denver. I picked up my laptop and walked her through the apartment for what must have been the 5th time since I'd moved in, pointing out new additions. The desk I'd set up for studying, the wall I'd finally hung pictures on, the kitchen that now contained actual cooking equipment rather than just takeout containers. Look at you, all domesticated, she teased, but her eyes were approving. That place looked like a prison cell when you first moved in. Amazing what a few personal touches can do, I agreed, settling back on the couch. How was your day? How's the amazing Lauren doing? Rachel lit up at the mention of her star patient, a gymnast recovering from ACL surgery. She took her first unassisted steps on the balance beam today. Obviously, just walking, no gymnastics yet, but it was a huge milestone. Her passion for her work was evident in every word, every gesture. The whole team applauded. She cried. I cried. It was a whole thing. That's incredible, I said, genuinely moved by her dedication to her patients. You're changing lives out there, says the man revolutionizing an entire company's inventory system. She countered with a proud smile. How's the implementation going? I groaned dramatically. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. The Northeast region is fully online and reporting a 17% reduction in inventory discrepancies, but the Midwest rollout hit some technical snags. I ran a hand through my hair, which had grown longer since the breakup, a small but visible change in my appearance that Rachel claimed to love. I was at the office until 8 working through the bugs. Hence the late call, Rachel observed, not accusatory but noting the pattern. You're still coming this weekend, right? My place is finally set up enough to have a proper guest. Wild horses couldn't keep me away, I assured her. We'd been maintaining our long-distance relationship for 6 weeks now, alternating weekend visits when possible. I'd been to Denver once. She'd come to Chicago twice. Each reunion was both wonderful and painful. Joyful time together followed by the heartache of parting again. 2 more days, she said softly. I can't wait to show you the hiking trail I found. The views are incredible. As long as I get to see you, I don't care if we're hiking mountains or watching paint dry, I replied, earning an eye roll and a smile. Sure, charmer. Now show me those progress pics Ethan's been harassing you for. I groaned again, this time with genuine reluctance. Do I have to? I feel ridiculous taking shirtless selfies in the bathroom mirror like some gym influencer. Yes, you have to, she insisted. Ethan needs to track your progress remotely, and She paused, a playful glint in her eye. I have my own reasons for wanting to see. Her flirtation still had the power to make me blush, a fact that amused her endlessly. Despite our night together before she left for Denver, our long-distance relationship had been relatively chaste, limited by geography to video calls and text messages. Our weekend visits involved shared beds, but also the slightly awkward navigation of a physical relationship still in its early stages, complicated by our history and the intensity of our feelings. Fine, I conceded, setting the laptop down and pulling up the progress photos I'd taken earlier that day at Ethan's insistence. 3 months into our training program, the changes were significant. My shoulders broader, my waist narrower, the softness around my middle replaced by the beginning definition of abdominal muscles. I was far from the fitness model physique that Ethan himself sported, but the transformation from the soft, slouching man Allison had dismissed was undeniable. I sent the photos to Rachel, watching her face as she received them. Her eyes widened slightly, her lower lip caught between her teeth. Wow, she said after a moment. That's impressive progress. Ethan's a miracle worker. I deflected, uncomfortable with the praise despite the satisfaction I felt in her reaction. It's not just Ethan, Rachel countered. It's your commitment, your consistency. Her expression turned more serious. I'm proud of you, Mark. Not because of how you look, though that's certainly... She cleared her throat. It's nice. But because you set a goal and you're seeing it through, even with everything else going on. Her words warmed me in a way that went beyond physical attraction. This was what had drawn me to Rachel from the beginning. Her ability to see beyond the surface, to recognize and celebrate the internal changes that the external ones merely reflected. Thanks, I said, meaning it. Sometimes I still can't believe how much has changed in just a few months. Speaking of change, Rachel said, her tone shifting slightly. I ran into someone who knows Allison today. I tensed involuntarily at the mention of my ex's name. Despite all the positive changes in my life, despite my genuine happiness with Rachel, Allison's cruelty still had the power to trigger an echo of pain. Oh, a pharmaceutical representative who visits the clinic, Rachel explained. When she heard my last name, she asked if I knew Allison from the advertising agency. Apparently they worked together on some campaigns. Small world, I commented, trying to sound casual. Did you tell her about your connection? Rachel shook her head. I just said we knew each other in college. But then she volunteered that Allison's been talking about planning a trip to Chicago next month for some big campaign pitch. Rachel watched my reaction carefully. It's a large city. The chances of running into her are slim to none. I'm not worried about running into Allison, I said, mostly truthfully. That chapter of my life is closed. Rachel looked skeptical but didn't press. Well, just so you know, in case you want to be extra careful about which restaurants you visit that week, her attempt at lightness didn't quite mask her concern. Honestly, Rachel, if I ran into Allison tomorrow, I'd thank her, I said, surprising myself with the realization that it was true. Without her kicking me out of her life, I wouldn't have found my way to you. I wouldn't have this job, this apartment, this new direction. I smiled. In a weird way, her cruelty was the best thing that ever happened to me. Rachel's expression softened. That's a remarkably healthy perspective. Don't be too impressed. I still occasionally imagine scenarios where I drive by in a Ferrari while she's walking in the rain. Rachel laughed, the tension broken. As long as you don't actually buy a Ferrari. Such a cliche midlife crisis car. Not a Ferrari, girl noted. I teased back. What's your preferred midlife crisis vehicle? Vintage Mustang, obviously. She replied without hesitation. Convertible. Candy apple red. I'll keep that in mind for your 40th birthday. We talked for another hour. The easy conversation ranging from work challenges to weekend plans to a debate about the best pizza in Chicago, a topic on which Rachel, despite not living there, had surprisingly strong opinions. By the time we said goodnight, the mention of Allison had faded to insignificance, overshadowed by the reality of what Rachel and I were building together. Distance notwithstanding. After the call ended, however, I found myself staring at my reflection in the bathroom mirror with new awareness. The man looking back at me bore little resemblance to the one Allison had dismissed as a permanent loser. It wasn't just the physical changes, though those were the most immediately visible. It was something in my eyes and my posture, a confidence that came from proving to myself, day after day, that I was capable of more than I'd believed. The possibility of running into Allison didn't frighten me, but I'd be lying if I said there wasn't a small, petty part of me that relished the idea of her seeing exactly what she'd thrown away. You're favoring your right side, Rachel observed as we hiked the mountain trail she'd been eager to show me. Has your lower back been bothering you? I adjusted my stance, impressed as always by her trained eye for movement patterns. 2 months into her position at the Elite Sports Rehabilitation Center, she was already building a reputation for catching subtle issues other therapists missed. A little, I admitted. I've been sitting more than usual with the Midwest rollout, probably just tight from all the desk time. She moved behind me, her hands finding the exact spot on my lower back that had been troubling me. You're knotted up here. We'll need to work on that later. Her clinical touch quickly turned into a more affectionate one as she wrapped her arms around my waist, pressing herself against my back. But right now, we have a view to enjoy. The trail had opened onto a vista point that took my breath away. Mountains stretching into the distance, Denver sprawling in the valley below, the October sun painting everything in gold and amber. Rachel's apartment had a decent view of the mountains, but nothing compared to standing among them. The air crisp and thin, the perspective vast enough to make my everyday concerns seem wonderfully small. Worth the climb? Rachel asked, moving to stand beside me, her hand finding mine naturally. Definitely, I agreed, squeezing her fingers. Though I might need that back massage you promised to make it down again. She laughed. Deal. But first, she pulled out her phone and handed it to a passing hiker. Would you mind taking our picture? The resulting photo captured something essential about where we were, not just geographically, but in our relationship. Arms around each other, mountain range behind us, faces slightly flushed from exertion and happiness. It became my phone's background image immediately, replacing the previous one of just Rachel at Chicago's Cloudgate sculpture. So, Rachel said as we began our descent, her tone casual in a way that immediately alerted me that the topic wouldn't be. I've been thinking about something. Should I be worried? I asked, only half joking. In the 3 months we'd been dating, I'd learned that this particular tone usually preceded a serious conversation. Not worried exactly. She paused, choosing her words carefully. My contract here is for a year, with an option to extend. I know, I said, my heart rate picking up slightly. We'd been avoiding direct discussions about our long-term future, both of us focused on establishing ourselves in our new positions while maintaining our connection across the distance. And your sublease in Chicago runs out in 2 months. I nodded, now certain where this was heading. I've been looking at opportunities in Chicago, she said finally, just exploring options. The University Medical Center has an excellent sports medicine department, and there's a private clinic near Lincoln Park that specializes in dancers and gymnasts. I stopped walking, turning to face her fully. Rachel, are you saying... I'm thinking about relocating to Chicago when my contract allows. She finished. Not immediately. Probably not for at least 6 months. But, she took a deep breath, vulnerability clear in her expression. I don't want to do long distance forever, Mark. And Chicago makes more sense for both our careers than Denver does. The surge of emotion I felt was so powerful, it momentarily robbed me of speech. The idea of having Rachel in the same city, of building a daily life together, rather than compressing our relationship into weekend visits and nightly calls, was almost overwhelming in its appeal. What about your team here? I managed finally. The work you're doing, the patients who depend on you. I love my work here, she acknowledged. But I've realized something these past few months. I can do meaningful work anywhere. What I can't do is replicate what we have. She looked at me steadily. If that's what you want too, if that's what I want, I repeated incredulously. Rachel, having you in Chicago would be... I struggled to find words adequate to express the depth of my feeling. It would make everything better. My whole life would be better with you in it every day, not just on weekends and screens. Her smile was brilliant, though tinged with a hint of nervousness still. So you're not thinking I'm rushing things? That 3 months of dating is too soon to be making location decisions based on a relationship? I laughed, pulling her into an embrace. 3 months of dating, maybe. But how long have we really known each other? How long have we been in each other's lives? 6 years, Rachel. We've just been circling each other all this time, waiting for the right moment to align. She relaxed against me, her arms tightening around my waist. That's how I feel too. Like this isn't new at all, just finally acknowledged. We resumed our hike down the mountain, the conversation turning to practical considerations, timeline for her job search, neighborhoods in Chicago she might prefer, whether my next apartment should be chosen with her future presence in mind. The logistical details were less important than the commitment they represented, a shared future we were both now openly planning for. Distance be damned. That evening, after the promised back massage, which Rachel delivered with professional expertise and decidedly unprofessional commentary about the improved muscle definition she was discovering, we lay tangled together in her bed, the mountain view from her window darkened to silhouettes against the night sky. I've been thinking about another visit to Chicago, Rachel murmured, her head on my chest, fingers tracing lazy patterns across my stomach. You just came 2 weeks ago. I pointed out, though the prospect of seeing her again sooner than our planned Thanksgiving reunion was deeply appealing. I know, but there's a sports medicine conference in early November, she explained. It would be the perfect excuse to check out potential workplaces while I'm there. You don't need an excuse to visit, I said, kissing the top of her head. But a conference sounds like good cover for your clandestine job search. That's not the only reason, she admitted, her voice taking on a slightly hesitant quality. Remember when I mentioned Allison might be in Chicago for that advertising pitch? I tensed slightly. Yes, it's the same weekend. The pharmaceutical company is one of the sponsors of the conference, and their ad agency, Allison's agency, is presenting their new campaign. I processed this information, surprised by my own relative lack of emotional response. The idea of Allison in the same city, possibly even at the same event as Rachel, should have triggered more anxiety than it did. Instead, I felt only a mild curiosity. So you might see her there, I said neutrally. I might, Rachel agreed. And I've been thinking, maybe it wouldn't be the worst thing if she saw us together. If she knew that we're together now? I finished for her when she hesitated. Rachel nodded against my chest. Is that terrible? To want her to know? I considered the question seriously. I don't think it's terrible. It's human. I ran my fingers through her hair, thinking. But I also don't think we should go out of our way to create some dramatic revelation. If it happens naturally, fine. If not, that's fine too. You're right, Rachel sighed. It just feels strange, knowing she might be in the same space and not knowing about us. Like we're keeping a secret we don't need to keep. We're not keeping a secret, I pointed out. We're just living our lives. Allison made her choice when she decided I wasn't worth her time. She doesn't get updates on the consequences of that choice unless they happen to cross her path naturally. Rachel was quiet for a moment, then lifted her head to look at me directly. You really have moved on, haven't you? There's no part of you still hoping to prove something to her? The question deserved honest reflection. In the early days of my transformation, spite had been a powerful motivator. The desire to prove Allison wrong about me had fueled countless grueling workouts and late-night studying. But somewhere along the way, the focus had shifted from proving her wrong to proving myself right. Right about my capabilities, my worth, my potential. There was, I admitted. At the beginning. A big part even. But now, I shook my head. I'm grateful for the kick in the pants her cruelty provided, but I'm not building my life around her reaction to it anymore. I'm building it around what makes me happy, fulfilled, challenged. I brushed my thumb across Rachel's cheekbone. And a significant part of that is you. Her smile was worth every mile between Denver and Chicago, every weekend of travel exhaustion, every night spent missing her physical presence. Same, she said simply. So if I happen to run into Allison at this conference, you should be your wonderful, authentic self, I said. No games, no calculated revelations. Just Rachel, who happens to be dating Mark now, living her best professional and personal life. My perfectly reasonable, mature boyfriend, she teased, leaning up to kiss me. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise, I protested with mock indignation. You just never noticed because you were too distracted by my stunning good looks. Her laughter filled the darkened room, followed by a demonstrative appreciation of those allegedly stunning good looks that left us both breathless and the conversation about Allison completely forgotten. Sunday arrived too quickly, as it always did on our weekend visits. Rachel drove me to the airport, both of us quiet with the familiar sadness of impending separation. 6 weeks until Thanksgiving, she reminded me as we approached the departure drop-off. And maybe sooner if this conference works out. I'll be counting the days either way, I said, meaning it. Despite our nightly calls and constant texting, nothing compared to being physically present with her. She pulled into the temporary parking area rather than the drop-off lane, turning to face me fully. I need to tell you something before you go, she said, an unexpected seriousness in her tone that made my pulse quicken with concern. What is it? She took a deep breath. I love you, Mark. She held my gaze steadily, vulnerability and certainty somehow coexisting in her expression. I've been wanting to say it for weeks, but it felt like something that should be said in person, not over a video call. The words washed over me like a warm tide, settling into all the spaces that had once been filled with doubt and inadequacy. I love you too, I replied, the words coming easily, naturally. So much that it scares me sometimes. Scares you? She looked concerned. Why? Because I've never felt this way before, I admitted. Not even close. And the distance is hard enough without knowing exactly how much I'm missing when we're apart. Her answering smile was both joyful and sad. I know exactly what you mean, but the distance is temporary. We'll figure it out. We will, I agreed, pulling her into a kiss that had to convey everything words couldn't. All the love and longing and commitment that had grown between us in these months. When we finally parted, she pressed her forehead to mine. Go catch your plane, system analyst Parker. Some of us have real jobs to get back to tomorrow. Her teasing broke the emotional intensity as intended. Says the woman who gets paid to watch people walk funny and fix them so they don't. She countered, shoving me playfully toward the door. Text me when you land. I love you? I love you too, I replied, the words already familiar though newly spoken. I'll call tonight. As I walked through the terminal toward my gate, I found myself thinking about the conversation regarding Allison potentially seeing us together. It wasn't that I wanted some dramatic confrontation or revelation, but there was a symmetry to the idea that felt appropriate. The woman who had discarded me as worthless, potentially witnessing the life that had flourished in the wake of that dismissal. Not for revenge, not anymore, but as validation of the truth I now lived every day. That sometimes our greatest opportunities come disguised as our most painful failures. You sure you don't mind me coming a day early? Rachel asked through my phone as I tidied my apartment frantically in preparation for her arrival. I know you've got that big presentation on Thursday. Are you kidding? I've been counting down the hours, I replied, shoving a pile of clean but unfolded laundry into my bedroom closet. Despite my best intentions to maintain the grown-up living space I'd initially established, the pressures of work and study had gradually eroded my organizational habits. Besides, having you here will keep me from obsessing over the presentation all night. Glad to be a distraction, she teased. My session ends at 3, then I'll head straight to the hotel to change before the opening reception. I should be at your place by 9 at the latest. I'll meet you at the reception, I suggested. Save you the trip back and forth. Plus, I'm curious to see this fancy pharmaceutical conference for myself. There was a slight pause. It's at the Drake, Rachel said, her tone careful. That's where the agency team is staying too. The Drake Hotel was one of Chicago's landmarks, an elegant historic property on Michigan Avenue, where the conference's welcome reception would be held in one of the grand ballrooms. All the more reason for me to escort you, I replied lightly. How often do I get to show off my gorgeous, brilliant girlfriend at a fancy hotel reception? Rachel's relief was audible. You really don't mind? Even if Allison might be there? Rachel, listen to me, I said firmly. Do I want to create some dramatic confrontation with my ex? No. But am I going to avoid places or events because she might be present? Also no. If she's there, she's there. We'll be polite if it's unavoidable, and otherwise just enjoy the evening together. I refuse to give her that kind of power over my movements in my own city. Your own city? Rachel repeated, a smile in her voice. Listen to you, all proprietary about Chicago after just 4 months. What can I say? It suits me. This was true in ways that still sometimes surprised me. Chicago's energy, its ambition paired with Midwestern practicality, resonated with the person I was becoming. I'd found a community at my local gym, become a regular at the coffee shop near my apartment, even joined a recreational basketball league that played weekly games in a nearby Park District facility. It does suit you, Rachel agreed. I can't wait to see you in your natural habitat, prowling the urban jungle. Less prowling, more awkwardly navigating a pharmaceutical industry reception, I corrected. Should I wear my suit? Is this a suit event? Definitely a suit event, she confirmed. Break out that navy one that makes your shoulders look particularly delicious. Delicious shoulders noted. I laughed. See you tomorrow night then? Can't wait. Love you. Love you too. After we hung up, I resumed my apartment cleaning with renewed energy. Despite the pretense that I was doing it for Rachel's benefit, the truth was that maintaining a more organized living space had become important to me for my own well-being. The external order seemed to promote internal clarity, a lesson I'd learned during these months of transformation. The next day proceeded normally until mid-afternoon, when pre-reception nerves began to set in. It wasn't seeing Rachel that made me nervous. It was the possibility of seeing Allison in a context where our paths would naturally cross. Despite my confident words to Rachel, I found myself spending extra time on my appearance, making sure the navy suit was perfectly pressed, my hair neatly styled, my shoes spotless. Looking in the mirror as I knotted my tie, I had to acknowledge the truth. Some small human part of me wanted Allison to see me at my best. Not to win her back, I had no interest in that whatsoever, but to challenge the mental image she surely still carried of who Mark Parker was and what he was capable of. Ridiculous, I muttered to my reflection, adjusting the tie one final time. This isn't about her, but as I headed to the Drake Hotel that evening, I couldn't completely silence the voice that whispered, but if she's there, it wouldn't hurt for her to see exactly what she threw away. The Drake was as imposing as its reputation suggested. Old-world elegance with high ceilings, ornate detailing, and a lobby that spoke of decades of hosting Chicago's most important visitors. Following the signs for the pharmaceutical conference reception, I made my way to the Palm Court, where well-dressed attendees mingled around high tables, champagne flutes in hand, name badges identifying their various companies and institutions. I texted Rachel, just arrived. Well, where are you? Her response came quickly. Near the fountain, blue dress. Scanning the room, I spotted her immediately. Her auburn hair styled in loose waves rather than her usual practical ponytail. Wearing a deep blue cocktail dress that made her eyes appear even more striking than usual. She was engaged in conversation with two older men who, judging by their animated gestures, were deeply impressed by whatever she was saying. I made my way toward her, navigating through clusters of pharmaceutical representatives and medical professionals. Just as I was about halfway across the room, a voice from behind stopped me cold. Mark? Mark Parker? I knew that voice. Would know it anywhere, even 4 months after last hearing it. Taking a breath, I turned slowly to face Allison. She looked exactly as I remembered, and yet somehow different. Still beautiful in her polished, deliberate way. Blonde hair cut in a sleek bob that was new since I'd last seen her. Wearing a black dress that was likely designer and definitely expensive. But there was something unfamiliar in her expression as she looked at me. Uncertainty. Allison, I acknowledged, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Hello? I thought that was you, she said, her eyes moving over me in a way that made it clear she was registering the changes. Not just the suit, which was newer and better fitting than anything I'd owned during our relationship, but the physical transformation underneath it. What are you doing here? I'm meeting someone, I replied, deliberately vague. You're here with the agency team for the campaign presentation? She nodded, seeming thrown by my composure. Yes, we're presenting tomorrow. Brandon and I led the creative development. She glanced around. He's here somewhere, networking with the client team. Brandon, the marketing executive she'd left me for. The name no longer triggered any particular emotional response, which was its own kind of victory. Congratulations on the campaign, I said, meaning it. Whatever personal history lay between us, I had no reason to begrudge her professional success. Thank you, she replied, still studying me with that puzzled expression. You look different. It's been a few months, I acknowledged with a small shrug. No, it's more than that, she insisted. You seem completely... She trailed off, apparently unable to find the right word. Transformed, I suggested, allowing myself a small smile. Yes, she admitted. But it's not just the physical changes, though those are. Her eyes dropped briefly to take in my broader shoulders, narrower waist, more confident posture. Noticeable. It's something else. Confidence, said a voice beside me. And suddenly Rachel was there, slipping her hand into mine with casual intimacy. The word you're looking for is confidence. Allison's eyes widened as she registered Rachel's presence and the clear implication of our joined hands. Rachel? Her gaze darted between us, confusion giving way to dawning realization. You two are together, yes, Rachel confirmed, her tone pleasant, but with a subtle undercurrent of steel I'd come to recognize when she felt protective. For several months now, Allison looked momentarily speechless, her carefully maintained composure cracking just slightly. Didn't know you were in touch. There's a lot you don't know, Rachel replied, still smiling, but with an edge that made me squeeze her hand in gentle warning. We had agreed, no games, no calculated drama. I work for Electromart Corporate now, I explained, steering the conversation to safer ground. In Chicago, systems analyst. Rachel's in Denver at a sports medicine center, but she's here for the conference. Systems analyst. Allison repeated, seeming to process this information with difficulty. So you finally finished your degree? Not yet, I replied honestly, but I'm working on it. Part-time while working full-time. Should be done by next summer. And your company is paying for it. Rachel added, a note of pride in her voice that warmed me. Because they recognize his talents. That's impressive, Allison said, and to my surprise, she seemed to mean it genuinely. I always said you had potential, Mark. The rewriting of history might have angered me once. Now it just seems sad. Her need to recast herself as supportive rather than dismissive, to protect her own self-image as someone who built others up rather than tore them down. You said I'd always be a loser, actually. I corrected her, my tone matter-of-fact rather than accusatory. Those exact words, along with some commentary about how I'd never advanced beyond assistant manager at a dying electronics store. Allison flushed, glancing around as if worried someone might overhear. I was upset. People say things they don't mean when they're ending a relationship. They do, I agreed. But here's the thing, Allison. You were right about one thing. I had gotten complacent, comfortable with mediocrity, afraid to push for more. I smiled genuinely. So in a way, I should thank you. Your brutal honesty was the wake-up call I needed. Rachel's hand tightened around mine, supportive, proud, affectionate. Allison looked between us again, something complicated passing across her expression. Well, she said finally, I'm glad things worked out for you. Her gaze lingered on Rachel. Both of you. How's Brandon? Rachel asked with such perfect innocent curiosity that only I could detect the mischief beneath it. Allison hesitated. Fine. Busy with the campaign. We've both been working crazy hours. Something in her tone suggested all was not well in paradise, but it wasn't my place to pry, nor did I particularly care. Oh, look, Rachel said, nodding toward the entrance. The conference director is trying to get everyone's attention. The formal welcome must be starting. Indeed, a woman at a microphone was asking attendees to find their seats for the evening's brief program. We should find our table, I said to Rachel, then turned back to Allison. It was interesting running into you. Yes, she agreed, that same complicated expression still on her face. Good luck with your degree, Mark. And your new position. Thanks, I replied simply. Good luck with the campaign presentation. As Rachel and I moved away toward the seating area, I felt her lean close to my ear. You okay? She murmured. Completely, I assured her, and it was true. The encounter that once would have dominated my emotional landscape, that I might have obsessed over for days, analyzing every word and expression, had already receded to insignificance compared to the joy of having Rachel beside me. We found her assigned table, where she introduced me to colleagues from other rehabilitation centers and medical practices. The formal program was brief: welcoming remarks, an overview of the conference schedule, acknowledgments of key sponsors, including Allison's advertising agency. Through it all, I was aware of Allison at a table across the room, occasionally glancing in our direction when she thought I wouldn't notice. Once I caught her watching as Rachel laughed at something I said, her hand resting casually on my arm, her face turned toward mine with transparent affection. In that moment, Allison's expression wasn't angry or jealous so much as wistful, as if she were observing something genuine that she recognized as valuable only now that it was beyond her reach. You look thoughtful," Rachel observed as we walked back to my apartment later that evening, the early November air crisp with the promise of approaching winter. "Penny for your thoughts?" I was just reflecting on how different reality was from the scenario I'd occasionally imagined, I admitted. I always thought if I ran into Allison again, I'd feel vindicated, triumphant, like I'd won some contest she didn't know we were having. "And you didn't feel that way?" "Not really," I said, considering. "I mainly felt sorry for her." Rachel looked surprised. "Sorry for her? Why?" "Because she seems stuck," I explained, trying to articulate the impression I'd formed. "In the same patterns, the same priorities. While everything has changed for me, for us, she's still measuring success by the same metrics she always has." I shook my head. There was no victory in seeing her. Just a reminder of how far I've come from the person who thought her opinion defined my worth. Rachel was quiet for a moment, then linked her arm through mine. "That might be the most genuinely evolved thing I've ever heard you say. Who are you and what have you done with my occasionally petty boyfriend who still sometimes dreams about driving past Allison in a Ferrari?" I laughed, caught. "Oh, that guy's still in here somewhere. He's just learned to keep better perspective." "Well, I'm proud of you," she said sincerely, "for handling that encounter with grace, for not needing it to be some dramatic moment of revenge." "The best revenge," I started, "is living well," she finished with me, smiling. "I know. And you are." "We are," I corrected, pulling her closer against the evening chill. Together, back at my apartment, as Rachel slipped off her heels with a sigh of relief and I loosened my tie, the encounter with Allison already felt distant and unimportant compared to the simple pleasure of domestic intimacy. Rachel moving comfortably through my space, opening the refrigerator as if it were her own, queuing up music she knew I enjoyed. "I could get used to this," she said, catching me watching her from the doorway. "Coming home with you, being in your space." "I like you in my space," I replied honestly. "It feels more like home when you're in it." She came to stand before me, rising on tiptoes to kiss me softly. "6 more months," she murmured against my lips. "Then we won't have to say goodbye every Sunday?" "6 months," I repeated, wrapping my arms around her waist. "We can handle 6 more months." And standing there in my Chicago apartment, holding the woman I loved, having just encountered the woman who had once deemed me unworthy of her time, I knew with absolute certainty that we could handle anything life threw at us, together. "Are you sure about this?" Ethan asked through the video call, his skeptical expression filling my phone screen. "That's a big step, man." "I'm sure," I replied, trying to keep my voice down despite being alone in my apartment. "We've been together for almost 8 months, doing long distance for most of it. She moves here in 3 weeks. It makes sense. Moving in together makes sense," Ethan conceded. "But the other part, that makes sense too," I insisted. "I love her, Ethan. I've never been more certain of anything." He studied me for a moment, then his expression softened. "Yeah, I can see that. And she feels the same?" "We've talked about the future," I said carefully. "Not specifically about marriage, but about building a life together. Taking the next steps when she moves to Chicago." "So this is going to be a surprise?" "Not the concept, just the timing and the details," I clarified. "Trust me, I've paid attention to the things she said she likes and doesn't like. This won't be coming out of nowhere." Ethan shook his head, but he was smiling now. "From you'll always be a loser to proposing to her best friend in less than a year. That's one hell of a transformation arc, Parker." "When you put it that way, it sounds like I'm doing it for revenge," I protested. "It's not about Allison. It hasn't been for a long time." "I know," Ethan assured me. "I'm just giving you shit. I've seen how you two are together. This is the real deal." A knock at my door interrupted our conversation. "That's the delivery," I told him. "I've got to go." Thanks for the pep talk, even if it was mostly just you questioning my judgment. That's what friends are for, he replied cheerfully. Good luck with the setup. Send pictures when it's done. I ended the call and went to answer the door, where a delivery person waited with a carefully packaged box. Inside was the custom ring I'd ordered, a sapphire surrounded by smaller diamonds set in white gold. The design was elegant but not flashy, distinctive without being ostentatious. Exactly the kind of piece Rachel had admired when we'd wandered past jewelry store windows. Rachel was coming to Chicago for the weekend, ostensibly to finalize details about her new position at the University Medical Center and to sign the lease on our new apartment, a 2-bedroom in a renovated brownstone in Lincoln Park, with enough space for both of us to work from home when needed and a small outdoor patio that had sold Rachel immediately. What she didn't know was that I had planned an elaborate proposal for Saturday evening, enlisting the help of friends I'd made in Chicago, including my basketball league teammates and several colleagues from work, to create a progressive surprise that would lead her to the lakefront at sunset, where I would be waiting. As I examined the ring, marveling at how perfectly it had turned out, my phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. Just landed. Taking the train to your place. Can't wait to see you. I quickly tucked the ring box into my desk drawer, heart racing with anticipation not just for the weekend's planned proposal, but for the simple joy of seeing her again after 3 weeks apart. Our time apart had been growing increasingly difficult to endure as her planned relocation approached. Both of us dreaming of the everyday moments we would soon share, the normal routines other couples took for granted. Rachel arrived an hour later, pink-cheeked from the February cold, dragging a small suitcase behind her. It is freezing out there, she declared as she stepped into the apartment, immediately enveloping me in a hug that was as much about warmth as affection. How do you live in this Arctic wasteland? Layers, I replied, helping her out of her coat. And the knowledge that spring eventually comes, even to Chicago. It better, she muttered, but she was smiling as she kicked off her snow-dusted boots. I missed you. Missed you too, I said, finally getting the proper kiss I'd been waiting for. Hama. How was the flight? Bumpy. The guy next to me stress-vomited into a bag. Romantic. I laughed. Welcome to Chicago in winter. I'm reconsidering this whole moving thing, she teased, heading to the kitchen to put on water for tea. A habit I'd come to associate with her arrivals. Her way of warming up both physically and metaphorically. No, you're not, I countered confidently. You're too excited about the fancy equipment at the University Center. True, she admitted. Their anti-gravity treadmill alone is worth enduring sub-zero temperatures. She leaned against the counter while the kettle heated. So what's the plan for tonight? Too cold for venturing out? I thought we'd stay in, I replied, having deliberately planned a low-key evening to contrast with tomorrow's elaborate surprise. Order from that Thai place you like? Watch that terrible action movie you've been trying to make me see? Generally behave like the old married couple we're destined to become. Perfect, she said with a contented sigh. Oh, I almost forgot. I have news. Good news or bad news? I asked, retrieving mugs from the cabinet. Complicated news, she hedged. Allison called me yesterday. I nearly dropped the mugs. Allison? Why? Rachel shrugged, but her casual posture couldn't quite hide her discomfort. She heard I was moving to Chicago. Wanted to reconnect since we'll be in the same city again. How did she hear you were moving? Mutual friend from college. You remember Melissa? She's still in touch with both of us. I set the mugs down carefully. And what did you tell her? That I appreciated her reaching out, but I wasn't sure we had much in common anymore, Rachel said. She pressed a bit, asking about us, how serious it is, how it started. A familiar wariness crept in. What did she want to know exactly? If we got together before or after she and I stopped speaking, if it was part of why I was so angry with her about the breakup. Rachel rolled her eyes. Basically, she was fishing to see if there was something going on between us while you were still with her, which there absolutely wasn't, I stated firmly. Of course not, Rachel agreed. I made that very clear. I also made it clear that I'm very happy, very committed to our relationship, and not particularly interested in rehashing the past with her. The kettle whistled, providing a momentary distraction as Rachel prepared our tea. When she handed me my mug, her expression had turned thoughtful. She sounded lonely, Mark, and a bit lost. I think things with Brandon didn't work out the way she hoped. I absorbed this information, searching for any emotional reaction beyond mild curiosity. There was none. No satisfaction in her apparent unhappiness. No vindication in the suggestion that the upgrade she'd left me for hadn't proved to be one. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, meaning it. "Nobody deserves to be unhappy, even people who've hurt us." Rachel studied me over the rim of her mug. "You really have let it go, haven't you? The anger, the resentment, it faded once I realized how much better my life is now," I explained. "It's hard to stay angry at someone who, however unintentionally, set you on a path to something better than what you had with them." Rachel murmured thoughtfully. "Well, just so you know, she asked if we'd meet for coffee next time I'm in town. I said I'd think about it." "And will you?" I asked, genuinely curious rather than concerned. "I don't know," she admitted. "Part of me thinks it might provide some closure. Another part thinks it's unnecessary drama we don't need in our lives." She set her mug down and came to wrap her arms around my waist. "What do you think?" I considered the question seriously. "I think you should do whatever feels right to you. If you want closure with Allison, meet with her. If you don't, don't. My only stake in this is your happiness. Have I mentioned lately that I love you?" she asked, rising on tiptoes to kiss me softly. "Because I really, really do." "You might have mentioned it," I teased back, "but I never get tired of hearing it." The evening unfolded exactly as planned. Takeout Thai food eaten on the couch. The action movie that was exactly as terrible and entertaining as Rachel had promised. Comfortable conversation that ranged from her patient's progress to my latest project at work to our plans for the new apartment. It was ordinary in all the best ways, a preview of the life we'd share once the distance between us was finally erased. And as Rachel fell asleep against my shoulder halfway through a second movie, I found myself thinking that this simple domestic contentment was the real transformation, more significant than my changed physique or improved career prospects. I had become someone capable of building and sustaining the kind of relationship that nourished rather than diminished me. Someone who recognized genuine partnership when it was offered. Someone worthy of the love Rachel gave so generously. Tomorrow I would ask her to marry me. And while I couldn't know with absolute certainty what her answer would be, I was optimistic enough, confident enough in who we had become together, to believe she would say yes. "Sonunamon, where exactly are we going?" Rachel asked, her curiosity evident as we walked along Michigan Avenue the following evening. "And why won't you just tell me?" "Because it's a surprise," I replied for what must have been the fifth time. "You'll find out soon enough." "I hate surprises," she muttered, though her eyes betrayed her excitement. "At least tell me if we're dressed appropriately. I feel underdressed for Michigan Avenue on a Saturday night." "You look perfect," I assured her. She was wearing jeans, boots, and the camel-colored wool coat I'd given her for Christmas, her auburn hair loose around her shoulders, casual but put together, exactly right for what I had planned. "Perfect for what, though?" she pressed, tugging at my arm. "A restaurant? A show? Please tell me we're not meeting friends." I look like I just rolled out of bed. "You do not," I laughed. "And no more questions. We're almost there." "Almost where?" "All I see is the Tribune building and—" She stopped abruptly as a familiar figure stepped out from the entrance of the historic skyscraper. "Is that Maria from accounting? From your office?" Indeed it was. Maria approached with a wide smile, carrying a small gift bag. "Right on time," she exclaimed. "Here you go, Rachel." First stop on your adventure." Rachel turned to me, confusion and delight warring on her face. "What is happening right now?" "Open it," I encouraged, nodding toward the bag Maria had handed her. Inside was a small snow globe containing a miniature Chicago skyline, along with an envelope. Rachel opened the envelope to find a card with a handwritten message. "Chicago becomes more beautiful with you in it. For your next clue, find the place where we first met in this city." Rachel's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "You've set up a scavenger hunt?" "Something like that," I confirmed, enjoying her reaction. "Better get going. Your next guide is waiting." Maria gave me a discreet thumbs up as we continued down Michigan Avenue. Rachel now practically bouncing with excitement beside me. "The place we first met in Chicago? That would be the airport, technically. But I'm guessing you mean the smoothie place near the conference hotel? When I came for that pharmaceutical conference." Good guess," I said neutrally, steering her in the right direction. Sure enough, waiting outside the smoothie shop was Doug, my former manager from Electromart, who had relocated to Chicago after our store finally closed, now working at the corporate office as a regional trainer. "Right on schedule," he greeted us, handing Rachel another small package. "Enjoy the journey." This package contained a bracelet charm in the shape of a smoothie cup and another card, "Sweet beginnings lead to sweeter journeys." Next, find the place where we watch the city light up from above. "The signature room," Rachel exclaimed immediately, referring to the restaurant and lounge near the top of what was formerly known as the John Hancock Center, where we'd gone for drinks during one of her early visits to Chicago. "This is amazing, Mark. How did you coordinate all this?" "I have my ways," I replied mysteriously, hiding my relief that the scavenger hunt was proceeding as planned. Each location held significance in our Chicago story. Places we'd visited during her trips, spots where important conversations had happened, landmarks we'd explored together. At each stop, someone was waiting with a small gift and a clue to the next location. A colleague from work, a teammate from my basketball league, even my next-door neighbor who had befriended Rachel during her visits. The gifts themselves told a story. The snow globe representing our new city, the smoothie charm commemorating our first real date in Chicago, a tiny book from the bookstore where we'd spent a rainy afternoon, a miniature basketball from the court where she'd watched me play with my league team. Rachel collected each item with increasing emotion, clearly moved by the thought and coordination the evening represented. As the sky began to darken and we approached our final destination, the lakefront path where we'd walked on her very first visit to see me in Chicago, she squeezed my hand. "This is the most thoughtful thing anyone has ever done for me," she said, her voice thick with feeling. "I can't believe you planned all this." "We're not quite done yet," I replied, my heart beginning to race as we rounded the curve in the path that would reveal the final setup. There, on a small promontory overlooking the lake, was a circle of glowing lanterns surrounding a simple blanket spread with champagne and flowers. The Chicago skyline provided a spectacular backdrop, the buildings beginning to light up as dusk deepened. "Oh, Mark," Rachel breathed, taking in the scene. "It's beautiful." I led her to the blanket, where a final small box waited. My hands trembled slightly as I picked it up and turned to face her. "Rachel," I began, my carefully prepared speech suddenly evaporating in the face of the moment's emotional reality. "The past 8 months have been the most transformative of my life, and you've been at the center of that transformation. Not as its cause, but as its witness and supporter and co-creator." Her eyes widened as she began to understand where this was heading, her hands flying to her mouth. "I was rebuilding myself from the ground up when we reconnected." I continued, finding my rhythm, learning who I was and what I was capable of. "But you saw me clearly from the beginning, not just who I was becoming, but who I had always been beneath the complacency and self-doubt." I sank to one knee, opening the box to reveal the sapphire ring. "You are the most extraordinary person I've ever known. Brilliant, compassionate, honest, funny. Everything I didn't know I needed until you were suddenly there, seeing me, challenging me, loving me exactly as I am while believing in what I could be." Tears were streaming down Rachel's face now, but her smile was radiant in the lantern light. "I don't want to spend another day of my life without you by my side," I said, my own voice growing thick with emotion. "Rachel Elizabeth Mitchell, will you marry me?" "Yes," she said immediately, with such certainty that my heart seemed to expand in my chest. "Yes, absolutely yes." As I slipped the ring onto her finger, my hand steadier now that the question had been asked and answered, cheers erupted from nearby. Rachel looked up, startled, to see our friends emerging from where they'd been waiting discreetly out of sight. Everyone who had participated in the scavenger hunt, plus Ethan, who had flown in from our old city specifically for this moment. "You got Ethan to come?" Rachel exclaimed, throwing her arms around my neck as I stood. "And everyone, all these people, they were all in on it?" "They were," I confirmed, holding her close. "It takes a village to pull off a decent proposal." She laughed through her tears, then pulled back to look at the ring properly for the first time. "It's perfect," she said softly. "Exactly what I would have chosen." "I know," I replied with a smile. "I pay attention." Our friends surrounded us then, offering congratulations, pouring champagne, taking photos. The celebration continued as we all moved to a nearby restaurant where I'd reserved a private room for dinner, another surprise Rachel hadn't anticipated. Throughout the evening, as Rachel displayed her ring and recounted the proposal story to those who hadn't witnessed it directly, I found myself watching her with a sense of wonder. This remarkable woman had agreed to spend her life with me, to build a future together that neither of us could have imagined a year ago. Later, as we walked back to my apartment, soon to be our apartment, Rachel leaned her head against my shoulder. "You know what I keep thinking about?" she asked. "What's that?" How close we came to never finding this, she said thoughtfully. If Allison hadn't ended things with you, if I hadn't stood up to her about how she treated you, if you hadn't met Ethan at that bar, if you hadn't texted to check on me that night, I added, if I hadn't answered. So many small moments that could have gone differently, she mused. It seems impossible that they all aligned exactly right to bring us here. Maybe not impossible, I suggested. Maybe inevitable in a way. Like we were always meant to find each other. We just needed the right circumstances to see what was already there. She smiled up at me, the streetlights catching the sapphire on her finger. Look at you, getting all philosophical. Next you'll be saying everything happens for a reason. Well, doesn't it? I asked, only half joking. Isn't that the point of this whole journey? That sometimes the worst moments of our lives create openings for the best ones? Maybe, she conceded. Or maybe we just make meaning out of chaos because it's more comforting than admitting life is random. Either way, I said, pulling her closer against the February chill. I'm grateful for whatever forces, cosmic or chaotic, brought us together. Me too, she whispered, reaching up to kiss me softly. Even if one of those forces was your ex-girlfriend being spectacularly cruel and short-sighted, I laughed. Especially that one. Remind me to send her a thank you note. Maybe we should invite her to the wedding, Rachel suggested with mock seriousness. She did play a pivotal role in our love story. Now you're just being petty, I teased back. Though the look on her face might almost be worth it, Rachel's laughter echoed in the quiet street, a sound I now knew I would hear for the rest of my life. Along with her wisdom, her challenges, her unwavering belief in the man I was still becoming. As we walked home together, snow beginning to fall gently around us, I felt the final pieces of my transformation settling into place. Not a revenge-driven reinvention, but an authentic evolution into the person I was always meant to be, with exactly the right partner by my side. The September sun filtered through the trees in Lincoln Park, casting dappled shadows across the white chairs arranged in neat rows. A string quartet played softly as guests found their seats, the mood one of relaxed joy rather than formal stiffness. Exactly what Rachel and I had wanted for our wedding day. From my position near the makeshift altar, I watched as friends and family arrived. My parents beaming with pride, Rachel's large, boisterous family filling nearly 2 full rows, colleagues from both our workplaces, friends old and new, including Ethan, who had become one of my closest confidants despite the geographic distance between us. And there, slipping quietly into a seat in the back row, was a face I hadn't expected to see. Allison, looking elegant but somewhat uncertain, her expression carefully neutral as she surveyed the scene. "Is that who I think it is?" asked my best man, a fellow systems analyst from work who had taken me under his wing when I first started at corporate. "It is," I confirmed, surprised but not unsettled by her presence. Rachel must have invited her. "Bold move," he commented. "You okay with that?" I considered the question, searching my feelings honestly. "Yeah," I said finally. "I am. It feels like closing a circle somehow." Before he could respond, the quartet's music changed, signaling the start of the ceremony. The guests stood, turning toward the back of the aisle where the bridal party would appear. First came Rachel's sister as maid of honor, followed by her 2 closest friends from the rehabilitation center. And then came Rachel herself on her father's arm, wearing not a traditional white gown, but a simple, elegant dress in pale blue that matched her eyes and complemented the sapphire in her engagement ring. Her hair was styled in loose waves with small flowers woven throughout. Her makeup minimal but enhancing her natural beauty. She looked, in a word, radiant. As she walked toward me, her eyes locked on mine with such love and certainty that everything else faded to insignificance. The guests, the setting, even the journey that had brought us to this moment. There was only Rachel, my future wife, the woman who had seen value in me when I couldn't see it in myself. The ceremony itself passed in a blur of emotion. We had written our own vows, and as Rachel spoke hers, promising to challenge me when I needed pushing, support me when I needed steadying, and love me through whatever transformations still lay ahead. I felt the profound rightness of our union in a way that transcended the day's formalities. When it was my turn, the words came from the deepest part of me. "Rachel, you didn't just witness my transformation, you illuminated the path. You showed me that the greatest change comes not from trying to prove others wrong, but from finally proving yourself right. I promise to be that same light for you, to see you as clearly as you've always seen me, to build a life with you that honors both who we are and who we're becoming. As we exchanged rings and were pronounced husband and wife, the applause from our guests seemed to confirm what we already knew, that this union was right and true and worth every step of the complicated journey that had led us here. The reception was held at a nearby restaurant with a garden patio, fairy lights strung overhead creating a magical atmosphere as evening approached. Rachel and I moved among our guests, accepting congratulations, sharing laughs, basking in the collective joy of those who had supported our relationship. It was during a brief moment alone, as Rachel spoke with her grandparents and I stepped away to get fresh drinks, that Allison approached me. "Congratulations, Mark," she said, her voice carrying a sincerity I wouldn't have expected a year ago. "The ceremony was beautiful. You both look so happy." "Thank you," I replied, genuinely appreciative of the gesture. "I'm glad you could come. Rachel mentioned she'd sent you an invitation, but we weren't sure you'd accept." "I almost didn't," she admitted. It felt potentially awkward, but Rachel and I have been meeting for coffee occasionally since she moved to Chicago, trying to rebuild some kind of friendship. When she invited me, she said it would mean something to both of you if I came. She looked at me questioningly. "Is that true?" "It is," I confirmed. "This day isn't about the past. It's about celebrating the present and looking toward the future. Having you here feels like acknowledgement that all of us have moved forward, grown from our experiences." Allison nodded, something like respect in her expression. "You know, when I first saw you at that hotel reception last year, I was shocked by the physical changes. But the real transformation became clear when you spoke." She smiled slightly. "The Mark I knew would have either avoided me entirely or tried too hard to prove he was doing great. You just were doing great without needing my validation." The observation was surprisingly insightful. "That's the real difference," I agreed. "Not the external changes, but the internal ones." "Rachel's good for you," she said. "You're good for each other. I can see that clearly today." "Thank you," I said again, meaning it. "Haha, how are you doing?" "Rachel mentioned you've been seeing someone new." "David," she confirmed with a nod. "He's a history professor. Nothing like Brandon. Nothing like you either. But right for me in ways I didn't expect." She glanced toward where Rachel was now laughing with her family. "I should let you get back to your bride. Just wanted to say congratulations in person." "I appreciate that," I said. "And Allison, I hope you find everything you're looking for with David." She seemed touched by the genuine good wishes. "Thank you, Mark. I think I'm finally figuring out what that actually is." As she walked away, Rachel appeared at my side, slipping her arm through mine. "Everything okay?" she asked, watching Allison rejoin her date at a distant table. "Perfect," I assured her, turning to face my wife fully. "You invited her?" "I did," Rachel confirmed. It felt important somehow, like proper closure on that chapter for all of us. "Have I mentioned today that I love you?" I asked, pulling her close. "Only about 20 times," she replied with a smile. "But I never get tired of hearing it." The DJ announced that it was time for our first dance, and as I led Rachel to the center of the patio, I was struck by the beautiful symmetry of our journey. We had both been in Allison's orbit, both valued her friendship in different ways, both been hurt by her actions. And yet out of that shared pain had come something extraordinary. A connection that might never have been discovered otherwise. A transformation that had led not to revenge, but to redemption. As we moved together to the music, Rachel in my arms where she belonged, the final words of my vows echoed in my mind. The best revenge isn't getting even or getting ahead. It's getting it right. And with you, Rachel, I've finally gotten it right. She looked up at me, as if somehow hearing my thoughts, and whispered, "No more loser, Mark Parker. Just a winner who found exactly what he needed when he stopped looking for others' approval and started seeking his own truth." "Our truth," I corrected gently, spinning her under the twinkling lights. "Our truth," she agreed, coming back into my arms. The perfect ending to one journey and the perfect beginning to another, more beautiful one that stretched endlessly before us.